Okay, we're live.
I hope you're ready for some stuff.
Target acquired. Rally on me.
60 yards rushing for himself.
Institute of Matter Transfer Sciences, owned by Ahmed Akbar, will attempt to complete the first matter transfer machine.
Someone's using a secure line to communicate with the outside. Can we find out who?
Oh my gosh.
That's for Shadamir.
Away from the computer! Away! In my wildest expectations, I would have never figured it being time travel. My mind is racing with the possibilities.
Transferring matter was bad enough. The time travel in your hands.
If Ram created matter transfer, does he know anywhere GPS coordinates can take them? You okay?
We have a problem. I agreed to build a timesheet.
They already did it. They sent Brent and team somewhere already. We can't kill him.
Jesus is a prophet. We should honor him. Yes, he will be correcting the greatest deception of all time.
I get it. It's the ultimate jihad. Eliminate Christianity by killing Jesus before the resurrection. Muhammad just killed off every Christian that ever existed.
He will be remembered as a great prophet, not as a son of God.
That was one of the best ones we've ever done.
Very good. Very well coordinated.
That was, it was like, it's getting better every time. We're so fucking good, bud. We're so fucking good. Every other podcast fucking sucks dick and fucking thinking of their audacity. You all fucking suck dick. Stop fucking podcasting. We're the fucking best. You're dog shit at this fucking game. Fuck you. Dog shit player. Fuck you.
All right, let's kick this one off. Okay, hello everybody. It's Chapo here. It's me, Matt, and Felix on this one, and we got a fairly juicy Christian film for you. That we're going to break down and analyze for you. That spoiler alert. Out of the I feel like dozens of these that we've watched, The Reliant, The Fireman Prophecy, all the Dinesh D'Souza movies, the one where Ben Franklin hangs out with Paul.
Yeah, the one we did with Bill Corden.
Yeah. Okay, out of all of these, this is the first one we've seen that like approaches like a real movie, and like actually was like kind of nice with it.
This movie was ambitious. It had production values. It is a new genre. This is a new genre, right? Christian hard sci-fi. This is a totally new thing. It's never existed before.
And it's like, honestly, like, you would think that those two genres would be incompatible with each other, hard science fiction and like a sort of evangelical Christian movie, but actually it works surprisingly well. And like, this is not a movie where you can go through and poke holes in like all the idiotic screenwriting or plot. Like, this was actually like a snare drum. This is tight.
Yeah, but we do want to make clear this is still an evangelical movie, so it was incredibly racist.
Well, it was not free of goofiness or corniness. But as far as these movies goes, it definitely there's definitely the most interesting plot that like had me get like sort of engaged with it. Like, you know, we'll get there. Let's talk about the movie today. We're talking about some historical events, or one historical event in particular. The film we have selected today to watch and discuss and analyze for you is a film that came out this year. It's a very new one. It's called Assassin 33 AD. And this film asks the question, what would happen if a terrorist group invented time travel and then used it to go back in time and kill Jesus Christ? Which I gotta say it does more, like it does way more interesting stuff with the time travel concept, which is something that's been beaten to death in movies thus far, than almost any other film that's like dabbled in time travel. I mean, I put this up there with, you know, La Jetée, Time Cop, Hot Tub Time Machine, the Terminator films, you know, the real classics of the genre. This is a fairly worthy entry. You know, I won't put it on the level of, you know, Terminator, but certainly Chris Marker's La Jetée.
It definitely puts more thought into the time travel element of itself and like does stuff with that than say Looper.
Yeah, no, yeah, way better than Looper.
Christian Looper kicks the shit out of regular Looper.
Absolutely.
Like this is a ambitious. It's like HQL would fall to his knees at the sight of Jim Carroll, the author of this incredible screenplay, who truly thought this out. He truly thought this out. I don't know what type of church this movie's affiliated with. I assume one of those evangelical churches that's called like Refoundationings, where they have like you know, sober raves and like, you know, laser tag and youth ministry. But keep it up, guys. This fucking rocks.
I mean,
like,
honestly,
maybe cool with the racism, but this shit fucking rocks.
We will describe for you what happens in this movie, but like, I will preface it by way of saying that, like, were this same concept like executed by someone who wasn't like a true believer, what you would get is like a very close and faithful rendition of like a Philip K. Dick story. This movie, like, if the same concept had been like slightly tweaked, it could have gone some really interesting places that would be like really actually like up there in like kind of a sci-fi pantheon. Like I said, like this would be very at home in like the Philip K. Dick canon. So,
yeah.
And I gotta say, as far as like all of these Christian movies, or really most of the movies we've watched on this show, unlike especially the Christian movies, this has a professionalism to it. Like this looks like something you would see on like a cable TV channel, like a TV show or like a low budget movie. Like crucially, Matt, as you said, the entire movie doesn't look like it was filmed in like someone's backyard of a subdivision, like the Reliant. Or like most of that movie was just filmed in like the woods behind some guy's McMansion. And like, you know, the performances were like credible enough. You know, like it just
they were.
It did not. It wasn't like howlingly glaringly unprofessional. You know, like all these Christian movies, it's just like, I just watch them and like there's just no propulsion to the plot. Nothing seems to happen. We forget who the characters are. Like people just show up and go away without any reason. Whereas this one, you know, it had a pretty propulsive, you know, tight, like I said, tightly plotted, fairly well executed film.
You know why that is?
It's sort of interesting.
Do you know why the evangelical movies we usually watch are so flat and bad? It's because the theology of American Protestantism itself is so flat. The entire belief system is we figured out everything. Mm-hmm. There's no mystery in the universe, which, you know, that's why so many great movies come from religious traditions that are the opposite of that. The idea that God is mystery, that we live in pain. There's so many great...
Like the Coen brothers.
Yeah, the Coen brothers, or like sort of Catholic tinge movies.
Abel Ferrara.
Yeah, Ferrara, Scorsese, yeah.
Why does this movie not have that? It's because they've added an element of the unknown into their theology, which is, what if evangelicals and Muslims had access to time machines?
That's throw a wrench into things.
Yeah.
You're not just listening to some guy like noodle on the guitar in a converted Best Buy. Like that makes you have to think for at least a minute.
Yeah. All these other movies, like it's bad things happening to people, and then them going like, I'm going to be okay because I believe in God, and He kind of fixes it.
Well, there's no action. You just have to forgive.
Yeah.
So there's no actual thing to do in these movies. Here, you got to save Jesus.
What I appreciated about what Jim Carroll, no relation to the Jim Carroll band, unfortunately, what I appreciated about what he did with this movie is that by adding the element of time travel, it creates a kind of like an actual attention to live out and sort of like dramatize like a lot of like interesting like theological and like intellectual questions that do sort of have to do with Christianity about like, you know. So let's just get into it.
Yes.
So Matt, unfortunately, he was doing mud pies. He was shitting out his doo-doo ass. Matt joined the movie late. So Felix and I will relate to you like the very beginning of the movie. So it begins, and it's a man and his family driving in a car. The wife is played by former reality TV star Heidi Montag, who you may remember
friend of Yeah But Still podcast.
Oh yeah, you may remember from The Hills, right? She was on that.
Yes.
Staring at the blank page before me.
Do not get your hopes up, though. She is not in this movie for very long. So
because these guys know what they're doing.
Yeah. Because like I said, like as soon as it started and I saw her and like read a couple lines, I was like, oh brother, here we go again, another unbelievably bad, like just poorly done on every level, just like shit show. Thankfully, she is dispensed with very early because it is a family, and the husband is like driving to his new job or whatever. He's got his wife in the front seat, his two daughters in the back seat, and you know he's just like, honey, I think this is what God wants for me. And his wife sort of just becomes overcome in the moment, and Heidi Montag looks at him and says, she tears up, and she's like, honey, I just have the feeling that
Your crypto can be earning you up to 17.
To my friends, supporters, patrons, and subscribers, I give you the gift of me talking about a cartoon you've never heard of for almost an hour.
Well, here you go.
The Venture Brothers is an animated comedy action series that ran on Adult Swim from 2004 to 2018. The show acts as a parody of the old-school serialized sci-fi action adventure and mystery stories you once found in comics, novels, films, and on TV, such as the Hardy Boys, Doc Savage, the Fantastic Four, Tom Swift Jr., and of course Johnny Quest. The show focuses on washed-up super scientist and former boy adventurer Dr. Thaddeus Rusty Venture, living in the shadow of his vastly more successful, heroic, and masculine scientist father, resentful and traumatized, but still carrying on the family traditions of super science, going on globe-trotting adventures, and regularly dealing with supervillains. Most prominently, his butterfly-themed megalomaniac nemesis, the Monarch, and dragging around his overqualified bodyguard Brock and the next generation of traumatized boy adventurers. His two oblivious sons, Hank and Dean, the Venture Brothers. Okay, that's a synopsis, certainly. That's what the show is about. But that's not what The Venture Brothers is, exactly. The Venture Brothers is a fucking world, man. This series is an unfurling web of narratives and characters that gets bigger and richer one way or another with every passing episode. So maybe I should lead with this. The Venture Brothers is my favorite television show. Probably ever. I've seen the whole thing through well over a dozen times, and it has yet to get old. To me, this show was a gift. It always felt like something that was too good for network television, and in the end, I guess it was. It was canceled last year after its last episode aired in 2018. There is thankfully a movie on the way that will properly wrap up the events of the series, but it still hurts to have the plug pulled like that. There's no more weekly t-shirt club, there's no more tune in next week Venturoos for Escape to the House of Mummies Part 3. The serialized adventure format was part of the soul and part of the joke, and it's just over now. Which stinks, but it's okay too. I wouldn't be a fan of the show if I couldn't appreciate things that end abruptly, awkwardly, and sometimes painfully. Since this came in the heels of former head of Adult Swim Mike Lazzo's retirement from the company, fans have hypothesized that he was more or less the main force keeping the show on the air. There are certainly a number of other factors in the mix, but whether or not it's true, it's a romantic thought that the series was kept in production by a single lone appreciator. It's fitting in a way, because that's who you do it for, isn't it? The one guy who gets the joke. Hi, I'm Steak.
Don't come any further, you're in the germ-free zone. Now pull yourself together, man. Hey!
I spent the past year and a half trapped in a box.
It's been a lot longer than that. Woo!
Let's make some magic. Much like the series itself, this video initially claims to be about failure, and it will be, but it'll be about a whole bunch of other things too. Sorry, you gotta title these things somehow. If SEO would let me get away with calling it Shadow Man 9 in the Cradle of Destiny, I wouldn't have given it a second thought. This video contains spoilers for the entirety of the Venture Brothers. If it looks interesting to you, give it your time. In terms of sensitive content, fair warning, it's a cartoon that ran on Adult Swim since the early 2000s. The show has a good heart, but you know, it was the 2000s. You get what you'd expect. I think you'll be fine. If not, that's fine too. Also, season 1 is a bit of a rocky start, but it picks up fast, and it might just be worth your time. If you don't, I guess you're just here to hear me talk, which is fine too. I missed you too, Stretch. Not in a parasocial way though, fuck off.
Let's cuddle.
Before I get too deep into things here, I want to rep some better shit than this. Channel Super Swim Team 7 made a couple great vids about the series and then graciously compiled most of the other analysis videos on the topic into a playlist, on which are two of my personal favorite creators on the platform, B-Mask and Strucci Movies. B-Mask also made a killer Fantastic Four video that for me helped sequence a bit more of the genome of this series. Since counterintuitively, I'm not personally much of a superhero comics guy myself.
What's this crap?
Trying not to use the word cape shit anymore, because last time I did an angel died. I've watched all the videos here, all great, big thumbs up, check them out, ring that bell. Don't ring mine though, it's poison. The Venture Brothers is the brainchild of series creator Christopher McCulloch, aka Jackson Public, and his co-writer Doc Hammer. I don't like to say brainchild, partially because it sounds foul, and partially because film and animation are a collaborative effort, and I want to give my respect to how much talent goes into the show's production. While these two do many of the voices, the actors they pull in go a long way. Every guest does a great job and adds their own flavor, and there is no Doc, Brock, or Dean without James Urbaniak, Patrick Warburton, or Michael Sinter-Nicholas. There just isn't. Doc Hammer is a musician and has written tracks for the series, but the vast majority majority of the show's music, including the signature opening and end credits, is done by J.G. Thirlwell. It's great stuff, suits the whole production flawlessly. And visually, the show is a treat to behold. It's not always perfect, it's outsourced animation for network television after all, but it's impressively put together. They bring on killer animators, strong background and storyboard artists, fresh talent and comic book veterans who can really sell the world behind these words. The painted backgrounds are gorgeous and varied. Every location has its own mood, and they match some ambitious storyboards. There's action and camera angles, there's day and night, and the animation is no less impressive. These are detailed and natural character designs, communicating who these people are, what their role is, and just about a million tiny references. The hands look like hands, there are body types and facial structures, beauty, ugliness, youth, age, and deformity. These are things you can't always count on in animation, especially on a budget. That being said, when it comes to the story and characters, who they are, who they'll become, and where they're going, it's nothing but Doc and Jackson. These are two brilliant guys who form like Voltron into one super genius. They each have their own strengths as writers. Jackson tends to lean a little harder on the format and grand plot lines, moving things forward with action and intrigue, where Doc will have the characters sit in a room and really talk for a while, getting into their history a bit. Not to say they both can't do both of those things very well, it's just sort of where they're writing trends. But what has really allowed the series to blossom and grow is from the conversation between them. They hone in on the specific kind of jokes and references you hone in on when you're talking with someone who's on exactly the same frequency as you. The kind of particular voices or outfits you saw in movies no one cares about, but that's somehow individually stuck in both of your pros, so you know they must be important somehow. That's the kind of nerdiness the Venture Brothers can really get to the heart of. Together they push each other to run with ideas you'd think were too stupid to run with if they only existed in your own head until they become brilliant. The series has an incredibly elaborate and impressive continuity, and I'm sure that this or that was planned out from the beginning, but I can totally buy that so much of this was made up on the fly and it all just happened to fit together perfectly. That's just what happens when people are in sync. Jackson has directed nearly every episode of the series, effectively all of them up until the last season when Juno Lee stepped in with Jackson supervising. Barring a technicality, since Careers in Science is a Doc Hammer joint, every episode in the series save one was being written by one or both of them. That one episode was written by Ben Edlund, creator of The Tick, and Jackson Public actually worked as a storyboard artist and writer on both the original live-action and animated The Tick series before the Venture Brothers.
President, I believe in you.
If you're a fan of The Tick, that might give you an idea of where the series' spirit comes from as a superhero parody, but even that doesn't really capture where the show's heart is at. Public goes into this in Go Team Venture, the art and making of the Venture Brothers.
This is going to be a Houston touchdown. The Oilers get the game's first points here in the second. You can't blame them for biting on that play action, Brock.
As an aside, I got this book for like $25 and it's fucking incredible. There's so much art in here and they go through almost every episode of the show in detail. With Ken Plume logging Doc and Jackson going into everything I've ever wondered about. Every joke, premise, and reference. Where ideas got out of hand and when they decided to run with them anyway because it'd just be funny. Well worth nabbing if you're a fan of the show. Anyway, Jackson goes into how the impetus for the show really came from an old Tom Swift Jr. novel and the realization of how much Johnny Quest had aped it. Tom Swift was published by the Stratemeyer Syndicate alongside Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys, so you can see how a lot of these things started getting mashed up, and where the jokes started coming from. That sort of Leave It to Beaver style 50s wholesomeness run up against a more cynical, modern view of the past, and of course what would be the reality of the adventures they go on. The show has never really been about the titular Venture Brothers, but it's not hard to see how they're the well everything sprung from. They, and so many other comedy duos on the show, are Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, functionally indistinguishable as personalities and on a wavelength they only share with each other. The confused and unwitting observers of a story happening around them, blindly walking into their own demise. When you write a comedy, you have to start with a joke, and Hank and Dean, at least initially, are the joke. They're the comical idea of a glassy-eyed Goofus and Gallant saying, "Golly gee," as they watch a man bleed out in front of them. To quote the book, everything is a little sad. I was younger, so I had an actively darker, subversive sense of humor. That's how you make comedy when you're younger. You make everything suck, and you make everything get chaotic and nasty and subversive. Not that I still don't love that kind of stuff. Now I just think about the characters. The roots of writing about failure is more hopeful somehow, and more based in real life. It's not just what's the worst thing I can do to these people. It's what's the embarrassing moment from my life that I can draw from. What's the real thing that happened to me, even if it turns into a version of it that involves lasers and nanobots. It's still, oh yeah, I shit my pants in public. Whatever it is, it comes from a more real place. That gets to the root of what does it for me about this show. There's truly nothing new under the sun. We've been subverting and deconstructing for hundreds of years, and the thing about artists is that they always want to make something that's never been made. We've seen Godzilla step on Bambi. What's next? I can't say the bare root of what if comic books but real is brand spanking new. We all have this perfectly generic idea of Superman in our heads, but comics are no stranger to new concepts, pushing the envelope and really exploring every direction a superhero can go in. And it's not just comics, superheroes have been fucking everywhere everywhere for a while now, and even I can tell we're getting more high-profile stuff with an edgier, more biting, and more comedic attitude.
What's it up, goon?
Excuse me. I identify as a hench?
It really all comes down to thesis and tone, and when it does, The Venture Brothers isn't a show about how if Superman was real, wouldn't that be fucked up? It's about how if Superman was real, you'd think he was a fucking dork. For every 1,000 people calling him an existential threat to humankind, you'd have 1,000 more Lex Luthors on Twitter saying, "Get this ass Boy Scout off my timeline," because that's real life too. It's not all war and tragedy, blood and piss and bad sex. That's all in there, of course, but real life is also pettiness and insecurity. It's the boring moments that happen in between joy and catastrophe. It's being surrounded by people you love and can't stand at the same time. It's weird enemies you don't understand how you made, expectations you didn't live up to, and trying to figure out if you're grateful or resentful of what you have. Real life is about failure. But you know what they say about failure? It's stupid. I mean, it's the best teacher and all that, but also it's just funny. When you fall flat on your face, all you can really do is laugh about it.
Oh, God. I'm gonna puke all over his crappy childhood memories. So good.
You can find something to smile about in something that hurts, and when you learn to do that, you can live honestly. Look at everything horrible about the world head on, tell yourself it's beautiful, and then start to convince yourself that it actually is. Or maybe the beautiful thing is just that you bothered to look in the first place. So that's what I think failure is in this show, or at least what it means to me. The way fucking up everything can just make it better. A little more funny, a little more endearing, and a little more human. So that's our theme here, folded as unceremoniously as possible into every trope and facet of pop culture the show can get a beat on. I hope you can see how a show could really start to grow from that. The idea that The Venture Brothers is a parody of Johnny Quest isn't inaccurate, but it can't really be contained by that label. It's more of a template than a box to be put in. The great thing about Johnny Quest was that it felt like it could take you anywhere and show you anything, and The Venture Brothers feels the same way, just with a different outlook. Take, for example, Go Team Venture.
I don't know, they just do that.
The show has had a number of catchphrases catch on, like Spanakopita and Ignore Me, the latter one being one Doc Hammer has been open about hating, or at least hating getting it parroted back to him, and knowing that definitely paid off for me. But the main catchphrase is Go Team Venture. It's one that's clunky and awkward, meant to rip on everything you think it's ripping on. But at a certain point, it just means what it means. It makes you remember everything, it gives you the warm fuzzies. It's still a joke, it's still self-aware, but you feel it. That's what the show is, less deconstructive and more reconstructive. Bringing back the magic, but a bit more honest, because you're a grown-up now. The Venture Brothers isn't here to ask, what is Johnny Quest? It's here to ask, what is Rusty Venture?
When you then you open up your hand and fight his
Sometimes you really just.
and now he's laying down. And whatever you come out with, you rub on his dick. Wrong! The Rusty Venture is a straight move.
Alright, I had to get that one out of the way.
Stay with me.
Dr. Venture, everyone. The man, the myth, the absolute dirtbag. You couldn't ask for a better leading man. By which I mean you couldn't ask for a worse leading man. Unsuccessful, self-obsessed, sick of his life, but still somehow oozing with an incredibly watchable anti-charisma. Rusty is our cautionary tale about the dangers of boy adventuring. He lived the Johnny Quest life without having any say in the matter. Traveling the world, seeing the sights, pulling the trigger. Like the Venture Brothers themselves, Rusty grew up being dragged by his father and batshit nuts friends and allies through a terrifying, violent world with hardly any agency. Something he never really found even after inheriting the Venture fortune. But unlike Hank and Dean, Rusty's father was more successful than you could ever imagine. Jonas Venture Sr. was a manipulative narcissist admired by the world for his scientific accomplishments of hyper-masculine James Bond meets Doc Savage public persona. He's a genuine villain who was able to take everything he ever wanted from the world by seamlessly fitting into the role of everyone's hero. Even without having been suddenly plucked from Rusty's life, he's not a man who would likely ever really be willing to hand the reins over to his son. This feeling manifests as Jonas Jr., an all but totally literal tumor growing in Doc his whole life, who, upon his escape, turns out to also be a much more traditionally capable and appropriate heir to the Venture throne.
That one is incomplete. Couldn't hang on through the contact.
The Doc lips.
Another look for him, Brock. And he might not the way he's playing so far, but this time just couldn't hang on.
Can't people?
Doc has spent his entire life being keelhauled through Jonas Sr.'s legacy without ever leaving his shadow. Now he's left pissing away his family fortune, unable to get over himself enough to properly operate as the super scientist he wants to be recognized as. And of course, raising two boys as a single father. Well, part of the joke is that the life of a boy adventurer would be traumatic. It's also that in Rusty, we see the child actor.
When do we get to meet Rusty?
I'm Rusty Venture. Why can't you kids wrap your heads around that?
What happened?
I left Neverland so I could marry Wendy. What do you think happened? Any good questions?
Someone who was once admired for a public persona that didn't really reflect anything about who they really are, who never got the chance to come into their own, so they slid down into nothing. Can you imagine having the entire world treat you like you never met the standard you set when you were fucking 9 years old? Bone chilling. And he's not alone. He's got other broken contemporaries, victims of the boy adventurer industry, I guess. Like Action Johnny, who may or may not be the actual Johnny, and whose thread in the series finds him slowly pulling out of being a psychotic junkie.
You can run, Johnny, but you will never get away!
Right? Yeah. We did that. Yeah.
Or your Hardy Boys / Menendez brothers. It all just hangs together so nicely. The series' knack for mashing up pop culture and reality is exemplified here. There was a real Rusty Venture cartoon, but there was also a real Rusty Venture, and the real Rusty's life was a nightmare. So he has to cling to the only image of himself anyone has ever respected, even though it brought him nothing but stinking thinking and dilly-dallying. Rusty is living between the terrifying reality of his childhood and the impossible weight of his celebrity. Doc doesn't even know what really happened to him and what was made up to sell lunchboxes. Did he really write it to run it on? I don't know, probably. You weren't there. Fuck you.
My father made me kill a man with a house key. I was 10.
You get to empathize with Doc in spite of what a bastard wretch he is, in part because he's so goddamn impotent. When Jonas Venture manipulates women, it's completely scummy. When Doc tries to, you just kind of feel bad for him. It's never gonna work, and deep down he knows that.
I'm a man. I need to be touched. I don't want to be laughed at, denied, or even feel like the pathetic man I clearly am.
Does make some solid points, Brock.
I think that's a great example of how failure can improve your view of someone. You get the sense he doesn't even really know why he's doing it. He doesn't know why he's doing anything. But you can also empathize with Rusty because whenever you get the slightest peek behind the curtain, he does genuinely want to be the paragon of progress and super science you'd expect from the Venture name. He's often shown to be right on the edge of villainy himself. The Venture Brothers, like so many richer takes on superhero stories, really likes to play with the concept of identity. It's the idea that good and evil, heroes and villains are just roles we play.
He vows revenge, and then you tell him that good always triumphs over evil. Does it? Of course not. Now get out there and get this crap over with. You're blocking traffic.
They aren't something fundamental or innate. They're constructed by the world around us. I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say the S word.
He always said he'd have the last laugh. He was always wrong.
Welcome to the end of the Snake Bentley We Live in a Society and Fiction Isn't Real Jackass trilogy. After this, we're done with self-awareness. We're talking about the anime where the hamster listens to the guy jerk off on the phone. As a real outsider, right? In the show, the main villainous organization, the Guild of Calamitous Intent, is really nothing more than a bureaucracy of LARPers, sustaining their violent role-playing through organized crime.
These guys like their system. You take that away, and you are looking at a bunch of pissed-off nutbags with ray guns and giant octopus.
Rich and powerful lunatics who built the world around a game they wanted to play. Even before that, they were people who wanted to make the world better. Colonel Lloyd Venture, Rusty's great-great-grandfather, was a part of the Guild itself until it splintered off and became what it is. It all comes from the same place. The serpent was already in the Garden of Eden. How perfect can that place be if it can't even keep out a snake who wants to trick you? There's really nothing of substance keeping Rusty on the good guy side. The good guys, the Office of Secret Intelligence, are again a mix and match. They're every SHIELD-type secret agent org and also just the US military, the CIA, and the FBI. Another example of people who never grew up. Only these people are running things, playing out their childhood power fantasies. They're barely less insane and bloodthirsty than the bad guys, so what's even the point of being a good guy in the first place? That's the world Rusty is caught between, and you can see how that could force him in some weird directions with this whole super science thing. Whatever moral compass he may have, it's being scrambled and dissolved by an acid magnet. He has a traumatic past and no respect for human life.
Not until we ship.
He's swimming in money he didn't earn and still feels owed something he doesn't have. He's scientifically literate, but not enough to actually help people. His scientific ventures are never curing disease or feeding people. They're all mad scientist bullshit. Clones and walking eyes and mutated lab techs. Because that's what he grew up around. That's what's cool. In the pilot of the series, he's bringing a disintegration ray to a science conference and saying, "What? It's not a weapon. It's just like a city melting death ray. What's the fucking problem here?" For everything telling him he's supposed to be a hero, there's just as much that screams villain, because they come from the same place. They're the same person. There's an episode where Killinger, Henry Kissinger, as this all-knowing Mary Poppins-style supervillain life coach, essentially rolls into Rusty's life, forces him to confront his past, and then presents him with the option to really be a villain. And it's kind of powerful. Doc has the whole thing laid out for him, clear as day. This role is here for you, waiting for you to claim it. You have your nemesis, you have your means, you have have the ability and the pain, you can do this and you'd be good at it. And Rusty can look at all of that, everything he's been through, and say, yeah, but I don't want to be evil.
He thinks I'm a... Brock, am I a bad person?
The hell just happened?
Am I, Brock?
That's the great thing about him. Sometimes being disillusioned just means you can see through the whole thing. Sure, the whole Super Science villain game feels stupid. It's not going anywhere. No one's accomplishing anything. It's all violence and roleplay. But at the end of the day, it's still real, and it still means something to us. Choosing to be a villain means choosing to be a bad guy. It means relinquishing the premise that you could ever do better, ever actually help anyone. And that's not who Rusty is. He's a scumbag, but he's a grown-up. Even in a show with brilliant characters, old pros and actual supermen, Rusty is the adult. And adults don't put on rubber masks and terrorize people just because it's fun. Because that would be fucking silly. Jonah Sr. realized all this too, but to him it was a joke. To him it meant being above everyone. Rusty can't be above everyone, so he has to meet them at eye level.
I suddenly get it. You're children. That's why my dad put you in the pool and made you duke it out. Newsflash, my dad was a shitty parent.
Part of the bitterness of growing up is realizing that we're all just children who got old. No one really knows what they're doing, and when you come to terms with that, you can either look down on people, or you can show them the respect everyone deserves. How you treat children says a lot about how you treat people, which in turn says a lot about you.
He says that he's got a PhD in child psychology, so, you know... whatever.
Jonah Sr. will sit on the sidelines of a soccer game and laugh when the kids start crying and biting each other. Rusty will go out there and say, "Stop fucking screaming! You're the ones who wanted to play soccer. You have to follow the rules."
This is how you deal with the problem.
Those boys are not your problem, Samson. They're my problem.
You're both wrong. Those boys are my problem.
That's why he's the better father, and it's why he's the better person. He's still bad, but at least he's grounded. At least he's honest and willing to involve himself in the game, even if it doesn't amount to much. The world may be nothing but a broken system, but it's still the world, and you're still a part of it. You can't just opt out, take the good and leave the bad. A fact that turned out to be JJ's fatal undoing. He wasn't willing to play the game. He stepped out of Rusty and into the Venture shoes, but then he tried to be Steve Jobs. He thought that's what being a Venture meant because he didn't go through what Rusty did, death raising villains and what have you.
Well, it's an antiquated system. Maybe my brother is good with this namby-pamby guy in a costume chases you around nonsense, but I'm not.
He only saw the good in Jonas Venture Sr., which was wholly superficial, and he wanted to actually be what everyone thought Jonas Sr. was. It's a tragedy because JJ was a genuinely decent person. He believed in the potential of science Rusty does, but he actually seized upon it and made a name for himself, exemplifying how much Rusty squandered what he had without consideration for why he was a squanderer.
Oh my
the show
God,
had to be about brothers. It couldn't have just been the Dean Venture show. It's all about two people who come from the same place, made of the same stuff, finding their own identity. Jonas Jr. comes off as almost even more of a smug prick than Jonas Sr., but that's only because he's the real deal. He's just better than you, and that's fucking annoying, but more importantly, it's not something the world of this show is going to reward for too long. This series loves its characters, and it can get a little distracted exploring all of the great ideas you can do with them, and that's amazing. But it's also amazing that it's willing to accept when a character has played their role and when they become a more valuable player dead than alive. It keeps things real and fresh. The most notable exception of this is probably Baron Underbite. It seems like a great idea, giving Doc his own Dr. Doom, but his joke just never came through.
That's it. I will tolerate no more of this madness.
He never found his place, and he just sort of got grandfathered out of the story on Gargantua alongside a bunch more interesting characters like Professor Impossible. Alongside the characters on the other side of the coin from JJ, like the Sovereign and the Investors. Villains who aimed a little too high and wanted to take the bad without the good. There's a weird sort of karmic balance to all the bullshit.
It is you who have forgotten your place. We were never meant to rule over these mortals. They are but fools. This is true.
Kept in line by characters like Killinger, the Master, and all the more competent higher-ups and keepers. Shows rooted in failure, somebody has to be keeping the lights on, which raises the question of how do you handle people who know what they're doing in a show like this? More often than not, the answer is simple. You undercut them. You make them a number two or a henchman and explain why they're there in the first place. Brock Samson, our bodyguard, is a good example of this. The man is a living legend, a Superman, a nut dispenser. So there's something not quite right about the fact that he's sitting here taking shit from Rusty Venture of all people.
It's way too tight. You look ridiculous.
Yeah, you look great.
Insults. That's what you called me away from my spring cleaning for?
There's reasons. This this is his punishment. He's protecting the magical hoo-ha, but really, this is just sort of his role. Brock is a tool of the agency. Just because he's doing cool stuff and looking good doing it doesn't mean he's not taking orders.
Carry on, good and evil, Superman. You work for the government.
What about
rule? Built for a single purpose by the United States. Have shut your third damn eye for a fucking reason. You can't teach a hammer to love nails, son. Let's go!
Brock was practically raised and whipped into little pricks. With the Ventures, that still means indiscriminately killing whoever he has to. That's his job, after all. But it also means being the nanny. Brock gets to look a little emasculated watching after the boys and still comes off in a good light because the boys need that figure in their life. It's not like their father is exactly a role model. Rusty is a better dad than Jonas, but by itself that says just about as little a sentence possibly can. He's inattentive, insecure, and either dismisses them entirely or can't stop projecting his own life and expectations onto them. Also, he just lets them fucking die. Brock can kind of see how bad Hank and Dean have it, so he gets to step in and be a dad a little bit. It's heartwarming in a fucked up kind of way. He definitely has more of a relationship with Hank, but it's clear he cares for both of them. That said, it seems like he was maybe holding them back a little, considering his skill as a protector. Season 4 brought a lot of changes to the formula, including Hank and Dean really starting to grow up and come into their own as individual characters, which coincided with Brock stepping out of the bodyguard position. He goes on to work with Sphinx, a sort of repurposed Cobra from G.I. Joe organization, with their facilities left over from when the OSI decided to wipe them out once and for all decades ago after they were framed for the supposed death of Jonas Venture Sr. It's a great one-season arc where Brock finally gets to play the vigilante a little, working outside the good guy-bad guy dichotomy to take down some actual threats for once, alongside Hunter and the other OSI refugees like Sky Pilot and absolute icon Shore Leave. The list of amazing threads and characters is, it's long, and I have to choose who's on top, which means I can't go into Shore Leave, and I just want you to know that it stings. Brock leaving meant the bodyguard role had to be filmed by ex-villain Sergeant Hatred. We're just about the sweetest old slab of this and that. Oh, he just wants to hug everybody in the whole damn world. He's nothing but love. Oh, we got tickets to a Broadway show. Anyway, he's a pedophile. Venture fans have echoed this sentiment, but I would have never, ever have expected to find myself this endeared to a former child molester. That's some vile shit, man. That's never leaving. But if nothing else, Hatred knows that, and he pays for it. On top of hating himself for his disease, he's also a recovering alcoholic. His wife left him, he lost his job, he lost everything. And now here he is, ready to be a goddamn Venture.
Look, I was in the Guild of Calamitous Intent, and I'm also a recovered pedophile. So if anyone knows the rules about abducting young boys from their bed, it's old Sergeant Hatred.
Why did I let you take this job?
Because I'm great!
Brock will go around the world. Maybe he'll teach an orangutan to box. Maybe. But he's not gonna let you hit him with a faulty shrink ray and make him hide in a ransom bag.
You can go out.
No.
Make some
No.
people.
No.
Well, fine. Thanks a lot for not helping.
Anything else?
Help me get dead people!
Hatred is up for anything, no matter how stupid, and it gets fucking stupid.
Hank, you know where you're going with this, and I love it! Let's cuddle.
That's why he's the best. But even so, Brock is a hard act to follow, even if you're not a sex criminal. The boys come to more or less accept Hatred as one of the family as well, but it took some work. Hank especially started to find a bit of a rebellious spirit in rejecting Hatred and emulating Brock in his absence. Again, this is the season where things really started to change, and the brothers finally started to actually grow up.
Oh, hell no! Not this crap again.
Granted, this was the season where the whole cloning operation goes up in smoke, which means the boys actually have to age. Have I not mentioned that? That the Venture Brothers are clones? Yeah, Hank and Dean have died. Like, a lot. In keeping with the Johnny Quest but a real-life idea, eventually you have to ask the question of, even with a guy like Brock, how do these two dumb kids survive this kind of crap happening around them every day? And the answer is they fucking don't, son. If there's one thing I believe the series really wanted to pull off, it was this. It just fits so well and makes perfect sense. That between the dangerous adventures, the serialized format, the legacy of super science, and the disregard for morality and humanity itself, the Venture Brothers keep dying and being brought back to life by their father. It's not like it really matters from our perspective as viewers. Hank and Dean die at the end of season 1, and then season 2, bam! Go Team Venture!
Go Team Venture!
When Hank and Dean quote-unquote come back to life, the show seems to reinforce that it's really all okay.
Come on, no, you're Dean. There's no other Dean. You're it, flesh and blood.
Look, I was conceived in the backseat of a Packard. You were conceived in a tank. So what?
It's not as bad as being dead. It's nothing more than a band-aid for a really big boo-boo. Remake their memories, remake their bodies, and they're back. It's like magic. It's literally practically the same as magic in the logic of the show. So really, it's fine. Except it's not fine. A bunch of kids are fucking dead.
They are his dead sons, forever haunting his subconscious mind.
Deep down, even Rusty understands that. This is morbid. This is what this life looks like. This is what happened to Hank and Dean Venture. And it's part of the legacy, too. It's just what this family does.
Helper's a family member. And when you lose a family member, what do? Cry? No. You rebuild him. That's the Venture way.
You've gone too far this time, Jonas.
I thought you'd all be pleased. I saved our friend's life. Yeah, but what kind of life is this?
As we learned in the last season, all of this is true of Rusty and by extension JJ and probably one other person I'll mention later. It's looking more and more like there are actually 3 Venture brothers to a generation. Maybe more. Things are getting pretty sticky. For the boys, it's Hank, Dean, and Dermot, Rusty's illegitimate son.
Go back outside and ring the doorbell.
Seriously?
Dermot is Hank's best friend, and it's really pretty heartwarming how he fits in. He's a shithead teenager in a way I find really entertaining and true to life, but he's still a good kid, more or less.
Mr. V, I have a full-time job, and I teach ninjutsu classes on the weekends.
Technically, he wears that weird padded giant baby suit for a rape prevention class.
He gets to play the role of a real person, actual teenager Hank gets to interact with to spur his growth into an actual person as well, instead of a cartoon character. For Dean, that person is the perfectly normal teenage daughter of Dr. Strange in practice, Mr. Rogers in person, Master Necromancer, and fan favorite, Dr. Orpheus. I'm kind of running into the same problem as the show is here, where I love Dr. O to bits, but I just can't fit him into the script.
They smell my cat.
He's adorable, he's wonderful, I love the Triad, I love the Master, but we got more important things to talk about. Like shallow gravy.
2, 3, 4.
Dean's growth in particular is more in line with what you'd expect from the guy who comes after Rusty. In Doc Hammer's words, Dean is a fulcrum. Things happen around him. Part of that is the role he's in. Hank was certainly that way too from the start. But it's also just his character. Dean is passive. He's growing up without control or context.
I say follow your dreams, even if they're about a giant spider with your father's head, and he keeps stealing your penis.
And of the two, he's the one Doc has effectively chosen to be his successor, without even really considering what Dean wants, what it would mean to him, or how it would damage him. Rusty, despite all evidence, genuinely thinks Dean is suited to the role of boy adventurer in a way he wasn't. He also thinks Hank wants nothing to do with it, but Hank is kind of going to be fine no matter what. Dean spends an entire season feeling tortured over the discovery he's a clone, but when Hank finds out, he just thinks it's cool. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of his sons, but that's just part of the Venture curse.
He believes this crap. He should have been Rusty Venture, boy adventurer. Hank got this life thrown at him, and he fights against it. Just like I did.
Since his father does nothing but project his own self-image onto him, that means unlike Hank with Brock, Dean doesn't really have a role model to speak of. Unless you count Giant Boy Detective. But it also means that Dean can actually relate to his dad a little bit.
Your dad may have been a worse father than you. Wait, I thought you said you missed the summer. I love you, Bob.
It's an awkward thing to bond with his father over having the same weird, fucked up life he inflicted on him. But that's kind of just how fathers and sons work in a certain way. The other side of all this is that it puts Hank in the position of basically being outright rejected by his father. Oh, Hank. Sweet Hank. The Hank of my life. The only bat for me, besides the one from Fern Gully. He's all the joy left in this world and more. He's picked up the right lessons in every experience he was forced into, and also a bunch of quotes from shit he shouldn't know about.
And they killed clean. Don't let Dean get in the way.
Honestly, Hank, where do you pick that stuff up? I never see you read.
And now he's clever, skilled, charming, and imaginative. He deserved better, is all I'll say. In spite of being saddled with everything that comes with the Venture name, he is truly his own Hank.
You speak of the truth. Your words are a very Hankily.
Would you prefer 1 Bitcoin or 1,000?
On 4th down, out is Ryan Rico, the punt.
On some level, behind all the bitterness and criticism, the show really loves its nerds. People who can get so deep into this stuff that they start to believe it really is magic, that it really imbues them with power. I think a lot of that comes from Doc Hammer. In Go Team Venture, he comes across as very attached to his dorks, particularly Billy Quizboy and Henchman 21, whom he voices and often writes for.
This is nuts. Like, half of it is written in Klingon.
the rest is Sindarin. Actually, that's Quenya, High Elven. Very similar to Sindarin.
Billy Quizboy is probably this concept at its peak. He and his best friend / albino permaleech Pete White are real, genuine failures. Billy and Pete don't have a trust fund and a compound to fall back on, so they're out here in a trailer in the desert pretending they're a real company. Billy is a brilliant surgeon, but no one actually wants to pay him to be a doctor, so it just results in him getting kidnapped over and over again to perform illegal super surgery.
Okay, I'm just gonna get back into bag and you can knock me out or whatever. I just want to wake up in my own bed again.
He has nothing in the world going for him besides his vast knowledge and love for pop culture. But somehow that's kind of enough, because it really is magic to him. Doc is the real Rusty Venture, and even though Billy can clearly see what he's become, he can also clearly see that Rusty is in there. The guy who really went on all those adventures and lived that life.
Wow, you are back. Being Rusty Venture, solving mysteries.
Being the king of the fanboys in a comic book world, Billy is truly at the bottom of the totem pole.
True.
But it also means he's surrounded by everything he ever thought was amazing.
True.
No, wow, we're super scientists. We are living the dream.
Even if his villain is just Augustus St. Cloud, that's still a villain, which means Billy's an actual hero. It's really all a matter of perspective. Even if all this old kitschy pop culture is outwardly meaningless, the feeling you get from it is real. It was the only real thing about it the whole time.
Right, it is magic. Why would you doubt that? It's the Please Tell Me ball. It was all worth it. We saved the world. We did.
Henchman 21 is very much the same. Doc Hammer said in the book that 21 and his arc is really what the Venture Brothers is all about, and I totally see it. Gary starts as half of the prototypical voiced by Doc and Jackson comedy duo that is Monarch Henchmen 21 and 24. There are a lot of those in the show, more than I had even initially realized. There's 21 and 24, Billy and Pete, Watch and Ward, Red Mantle and Dragoon, Tim, Tom, and
Pete
Kevin,
is my
and looser
favorite
ones
character.
like Hank and Dermot, the Monarch and Dr. Mrs. the Monarch, the Monarch and 21, Sky Pilot and Holy Diver.
Only weapon you'll ever need, friend.
Let's go. They have all the great conversations over meaningless pop culture bullshit that give this show its identity.
Please, she'd be an Astrid 24/7 if she didn't lay eggs.
You Papa Smurf has a f***ing beard. You're a mammal.
Again, this whole show is a conversation. Well, 21 and 24 in particular, it's Rosencrantz
Papa
and Guildenstern
Smurf has a
arcade.
fucking
Full
beard.
grounded background
He's a
characters who can't stop
mammal.
drawing attention to how meta the whole thing is.
You're the guy who doesn't come back.
Yeah, the guy who just shows up that nobody's ever seen before.
Right, he's all professional. Yeah, dude, you're a goner.
They really begin to think that in this whole comic book / Saturday morning cartoon world, they're kind of the main characters. However that happened, they're here now, playing those roles.
Dude, we're like those guys on TV that never get shot. Yeah, we're like main characters.
Don't jinx it.
It's not like they're wrong
Don't
either.
jinx
This is a
it.
cartoon. They're focused. What they didn't pick up on is that
Don't
this isn't a
jinx
Saturday
it.
morning cartoon. This is the Venture Brothers, and the Venture Brothers is going to treat you like this is real life. That means if you're running around bombs, mummies, acid, and lasers, unless you have a whole bunch of clones waiting to back you up, you're going to get yourself killed. It really is a shame to break up a duo like 21 and 24, but it's also the best thing that could have ever happened for Gary's character. Again, the show isn't hurting for these duos, but it needed a Gary. After 24 dies, he starts carrying his spirit with him, initially literally, then figuratively.
Come on! You help me all the time.
Do I? Do I just let you feel secure enough to trust your intuition?
No! You are real!
Losing 24's ghost is one of the most moving scenes in the show to me, personally. But 21 gets his shit together because of it. He goes bear mode, learns how to do his job really well, to the point that he can make a plan and put up a fight against Brock Sampson of all people. Underneath it all, though, he never stops being a dork. He never stops making all these Goonie references and collecting all this crap.
At least you don't live in spiders and breathe anymore.
Who the hell is
You boy!
One of you.
His love never went away, he just started living in the real world too. It's a really beautiful thing, and he's rewarded for it. He started off as being valuable only for being somehow totally expendable and invincible in the eyes of his bosses, but he eventually becomes really respectable to them. In spite of being insane, the Monarch is like a father and role model to 21. He basically takes Dr. Mrs. the Monarch's seat next to the Monarch after she moves on to the Guild, and he and the Monarch end the series as actual best friends. The Team Monarch dynamic is pretty interesting in that way. Dr. used to be his girlfriend, used to play the classic sitcom role of vastly more competent and intelligent than her husband character.
So, all I gotta do is stay alive? And Rusty Venture is mine?
That's what it says. Dr.
That's what it says.
The show is definitely lacking for women, and I think it's a symptom of that the most prominent woman in the show is being voiced by Doc Hammer talking like this.
Oh yeah, that guy is totally straight.
I saw a whole thing about him on the VH1.
But he's the guy from Depeche Mode.
It reads as a joke the first time you hear it, and was definitely intended as one, but you get used to it so fast.
True.
It's just her voice. There's nothing off about it.
True.
It is a shame that her role is mostly defined by her relationship with her husband, but for this series it does kind of work. Again, it's putting competent characters in a second fiddle position and justifying it by saying that's just what they were meant to be doing. It's where they fit into the puzzle. In later seasons, she gets promoted to Guild Top Brass, and she's great at it, but it also clearly shakes up the Monarch crew dynamic. Part of that is that she isn't working for him anymore, and part of it is being so wrapped up in the bureaucracy of the whole thing. She and Top 10 awesome dickhead Phantom Limb, her ex, are effectively running the guild in the wake of the death of the Sovereign and the Council of 13 after Gargantua 2. And that's hard on both her and the Monarch because, well, I guess we should just dive into him now. The Monarch has been a guild villain since day one, but he's never really jived with the whole guild thing in the first place. He's not a rules and paperwork guy, he's a die Dr. Venture kind of guy. He's got this unshakable grudge against a guy who, by all accounts, doesn't matter at all. He's both totally self-obsessed and Rusty-obsessed, which may or may not be more or less the same thing. I'll say it, I'm pretty sure the Monarch is a clone. When Ben is inspecting Dean in the episode where Dean discovers he's a clone, he checks for symptoms of cloning and lists them off in order.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the Monarch is a clone. Like, I'll say it.
Facial-nasal dysystosis with comorbid idiopathic hirsutism in the orbital region, yet clear early-stage androgenic alopecia. Poor little bastard. Pupillary response good. The subject is free of any fetiform teratoma and appears to have normal heart and lung function.
In effect, bald, tumor, eyebrows. It's all there. In the last episode of the show, we do learn the Monarch is blood-related to Dr. Venture. I mean, the simple answer is Jonas Sr. slept with the Monarch's mother, so I guess Jonas is his dad. But it don't taste quite right. It's a little too simple. It's a little too easy. Sometimes you get the simple answer, and sometimes you get Grover Cleveland's presidential time machine. So, it's fun to speculate and all, but I obviously can't make any definitive statements. At the very least, we all get to go, ooh, Doc and the Monarch were the real Venture Brothers the whole time. It all just fits. I love it. I live for it.
Wow.
All we really know is that somewhere in this whole mess of lore and history, the Monarch just started fucking despising Rusty beyond words. A grudge of truly mythic proportion. And that drives his life. It's too extreme a hatred to even be contained by the hero-villain system.
Hatred's become a job. I had true hatred with Venture. I didn't have to fake it. That sweet loathing just poured out of me whenever I saw his pathetic face.
In one of the best plot lines of the show, the Monarch discovers his father was the Blue Morpho,
true
Team Green Hornet style vigilante and Team Venture ally.
I just don't understand it. I just
21 as Kados in order to mark every single villain who has arching rights to Dr. Venture ahead of him. All culminating in some of the best reveals the show has on tap. I'm so glad I was already a fan before the Morphic trilogy, because I felt like we were just never gonna get answers to these things. And then bam, Sharky's machine. It shook me to my core. The Monarch's dad, the original Blue Morpho, was maybe the greatest victim of Jonas Sr.'s manipulation. He caught him making the biggest mistake of his life on tape and then blackmailed him into being used as a tool, handling the things Team Venture was too good to do themselves.
I need you to seduce Dr. Z.
He was maintaining the illusion, masking who Jonas Venture Sr. really was. And after he died, he left the Monarch insane and with a massive trust fund to blow through in pursuit of his grudge. He became another victim of the Venture philosophy, brought back to life as a cyborg to be used all over again.
Billy, I'm going to need you to transplant my brain into Venturi.
Wait, no, that'll kill him. I took a Hippocratic oath. I didn't.
So now the good guy is the bad guy is the vigilante is getting cucked, and none of it matters to the Monarch himself because he just wants to act on his hatred. The Monarch and Rusty are very similar in ways beyond their appearance or genes. Pretty much everything I listed that would make Rusty a great villain is also true of the Monarch.
I can't remember a day of my life that you didn't up.
Calm down. Look at all that history. We have so much in common.
Oh, you don't know the half of it, buddy boy.
What is that supposed to be?
He's bitter, passionate about his dumb toys. He's sitting on a fortune he didn't earn and still feels like he's owed something. It's all there. And both of them can, at the end of it all, kind of see through all the bullshit. They're putting up with the system and the paperwork because they have to, but that's not what it's about for them. I think that's why it kind of makes sense that the vastly more competent characters like Dr. and Mrs. the Monarch and Late Game 21 follow the Monarch in the first place. It's the fact that even though the Monarch isn't very good at this whole super supervillain thing.
It's classic Monarch, look at my cool new thing approach. I got my money on
Classic
acid,
Monarch,
magnet kind of
look at
thing.
my cool new thing.
He goes too far and spends too much money. He breaks what he's not
That
supposed to
episode is
break. He
awesome.
can't
He
operate within the
buys, like, a
rules, but he can
fucking
do this stuff.
giant
Somehow,
hive,
in one
and
way
he
or another,
crashes
the
in a
Monarch is
canyon,
maybe a genuine
and it
artist.
results in like a
Right?
massive
Like, sure, those two are
shootout
good
that
at it, but they
kills,
don't give
like,
a
his
shit about Dr.
entire
Venture.
crew.
They give a shit about the Monarch. There's a magnetic quality about a person who's really honestly fighting for something. It's a surprisingly hard thing to come by, that kind of passion. And naturally, it puts him at odds with the Guild. I mean, why would you want to be a supervillain if you wanted to follow the rules? The whole supervillain deal is supposed to be rock and roll, isn't it? The Sovereign was fucking Bowie. I mean, he wasn't really Bowie, but he was Bowie. Red Mantle and Dragoon are maybe Buddy Holly in the Big Bopper. The Guild started because Phantomus wanted to be in a band. It's rock and roll. It's the appeal of showing up with lights and a fog machine, throwing up the birds and saying, fuck you, you can't tell me what to do.
And maybe you're really good at playing rock and roll. Maybe you're good enough to build an industry from it, spawn a bunch of imitators.
Maybe people get really good at selling tickets and making money.
And there are 1,000 people behind the scenes shuffling paperwork to sustain that. Maybe now you can do it as much as you want, but you find yourself asking, what was the point of this? Maybe you have access to everything you thought you ever wanted, but you're finding it impossible to give a fuck. And then you see a psychopath in a butterfly costume who can't do anything right, but goddamn if he doesn't give a fuck. And then you become a henchman, I guess. I don't know, I lost track of this hypothetical. I guess that's why the...
Yeah, and then you become a henchman.
Summit Series was never just built.
Without unbelievable blocking up front. So let's give the big guys all the credit in the
Why
world.
the stalemate by design in this show rings true, even to me, some kind of internet anime guy. In a future where all media is fed through the Disney washing machine and stripped of all its worth to be the most acceptable to the largest number of people, where culture and conversation are manipulated through flawless content algorithms serving growing numbers over the people that comprise them, I have to admit I find a certain joy in failure, making jokes to make myself laugh, and no one else, getting creator tips from YouTube and saying, no, I don't think I will grow my audience today. Sorry everybody, I'm just not a ladder climber. But I'm still here, aren't I? Talking about the Venture Brothers because I love it. Because it means all this to me and I projected myself onto it this much. I guess I failed as a YouTuber, but I'm still having fun just doing things my own way. The only way I ever will. Every now and then I have to remind myself I don't care for a reason. I just care. No matter how bad things are, that's the part that matters. That's why a show ostensibly about failure can still feel so uplifting. Because there's a passion underneath how awful and broken everything is. There's a real family in here, a real adoration for all this incredibly niche nerd crap. There's just love, and when you learn to love the things that suck, you can't really lose. In the Venture spirit, I wanted to cut the brakes and close on a really sudden and awkward joke. But when I got to the end of Go Team Venture and read the afterword, I found myself pretty moved by it, and I'd rather share it with you. Not that I think Doc Hammer would necessarily want me sharing it, but fuck you with my video. I hope you learned nothing from this book. It would murder my leathery black heart if I thought you got it. Your curiosity now satiated and the mystery dispelled, you move on, fat with the feeling of being in the know. I wouldn't admit that you broke my heart. Were I to be questioned, I'd look away and tell you that I wasn't crying and that I had cat dander in my eye. But you'd know. You always do. How do I want you to feel? How do I want you to feel right as you're about to put this book away and notice that there's this little afterword at the back? I want you to feel like you found a box of love letters under the floorboards of your house. Like one of those plastic recipe boxes your grandmother had. You found this box and secreted it away to your room because you had the unreasonably high hopes that it had jewelry or pornography in it. There in your room, you open it up and it's just this meaty pile of love letters bound with an old yellow scrunchie. You look again to see if your door is locked before you begin to read them. Pulling off the hair tie, you notice that each missive is written in tiny, antiquated, florid script. Page after page of some love-drunk idiot pouring so much heart out. At first it feels alien and maybe a little intrusive to be a part of this fevered world of pitched woo. But with each successive letter, you begin to feel yourself a part of this love affair. Knowing that you will never quite understand the fever contained in its pages, it's a mirror of your fever. Yes, it feels strangely familiar. Then, in a sudden panic, you stop reading and drop the pages to the ground. You jump back as your heart races because the letters no longer feel like a revelation. They feel like memories. Did you write these letters? Were they written to you? This is insane. Who wrote these? Now in a frenzy, you look for a signature at the bottom of the page. Nothing. Only this phrase repeated at the end of every letter. I love you, Venture Brothers. That's how I want you to feel. Like you learned jack squat, but felt a part of our frenzied love for the Venture Brothers. Before you made the mistake of reading this book, you felt like you and you alone understood the Venture Brothers. You felt like the show was written for you. You were right. It was. Don't let this book tell you differently. Don't believe the lies. Forget the half-remembered anecdotes and cryptic scribbles. It's still your show.
No one will ever understand it but you. You simply stumbled upon our love letters. Ignore me. I don't really have anything I'm comfortable adding to that, so instead I'll opt to repeat myself. The show was a gift. Thank you.
It was. It was the world's greatest gift that got canceled. Because
The
Rick
idea
and
of
Morty
using horror
had
to explore discrimination isn't new, but what happens when a game...
Because Rick and Morty. But we gotta have 7 more seasons of Rick and Morty. I hope Smiling Friends doesn't get canceled. I'll be really upset because that's honestly my new favorite show on Adult Swim. I really hope it doesn't get the Venture Brothers treatment. It's good. It's good. Good shows don't last long on Adult Swim. That's my point. I'm gonna take a break. I hope you enjoy this. Just ignore me real quick. I'm making some food. Or bear with me. The bear has to eat. Okay. Close that up. Okay. Dinner, lunch, and breakfast all into one.
The idea of using horror to explore discrimination isn't new, but what happens when a game forces you to become the very thing you might condemn in real life, making split-second judgments about who deserves to live based on physical characteristics you can barely verify? No, I'm Not Human, released in September 2025 by Russian studio Trioskaz, presents perhaps the most uncomfortable mirror to real-world prejudice in recent memory, wrapping social commentary in a post-apocalyptic survival game where identifying the other becomes a matter of life and death. Every knock at your door presents an impossible choice between compassion and survival, between extending trust to a stranger who might be desperate for shelter, or opening your home to something that wears a human face but harbors inhuman intent. What makes the experience particularly relevant for our current times is how it parallels real-world discrimination, the mechanics of checking papers, examining physical features, and deciding who belongs feel deliberately uncomfortable in their real-world parallels. The solar apocalypse that drives people from their homes serves as a metaphor for any crisis that creates refugees and outsiders, while the government's daily broadcasts of supposed identifying traits mirror the way prejudice gets institutionalized through official channels that claim scientific authority. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And with all that out of the way, my name's Wick, and today we're going to examine how No, I'm Not Human explores discrimination.
Epiclar by...
To promise he'll drop by later that night, but this peaceful facade normalcy, complete with a cheery version of the game opens with a last day of normalcy, complete with a cheery version of the recurring musical theme and shots of the beach, as your neighbor calls to promise he'll drop by later that night. But this peaceful facade quickly crumbles as solar activity begins dramatically increasing, triggering catastrophic global warming that renders daytime lethal. The sun becomes so intense that simply looking outside can burn your eyes from their sockets, and the streets fill with charred corpses twisted into positions of agony, forcing society to adopt a nocturnal lifestyle where darkness becomes the only refuge from the burning light above. Yet darkness brings its own terrors in the form of visitors, hostile beings who reportedly emerge from underground and use human appearances to gain the trust of victims before killing them. The name itself carries loaded implications, establishing them as outsiders, intruders, beings who don't belong in the world above. The government responds through FEMA, which immediately frames these creatures as a threat requiring identification and elimination, broadcasting daily updates about physical traits that supposedly distinguish visitors from real humans. These traits are circumstantial in nature: flawless teeth, dirty fingernails, bloodshot eyes, characteristics that could easily apply to anyone depending on their circumstances, yet they become markers of otherness that justify violence. What makes the identification process particularly tragic is that most visitors aren't even aware they are visitors, and those who become aware of their nature often react with violence or desperate rejection of this fact. The game establishes from its opening moments that you're being asked to make life and death decisions based on superficial, physical characteristics broadcast by authorities who may not fully understand what they're dealing with. You are an unnamed man, living alone in a house inherited from your father, with whom you had a difficult relationship. A detail revealed through scattered photographs and conversations that suggest you chose not to be part of your family. The house contains remnants of a different life. Pictures of a woman and a cat lying on furniture in the main hallway, possibly a spouse and pet from a time when isolation wasn't your defining characteristic. Your house becomes the sole location where the entire game takes place. A claustrophobic setting divided into a hallway and 6 rooms where guests will take refuge. The windows that once offered views of your neighbor's farm and the fields beyond now serve as observation posts for watching society collapse. Emergency workers removing bodies, FEMA soldiers patrolling, and eventually the appearance of something far more sinister. Radio and TV becomes your primary connection to the outside world. The TV broadcasts pro-FEMA propaganda, while independent radio voices expose their atrocities, shooting quarantine escapees, mysterious experiments, and eventually a military coup, creating cognitive dissonance as you distrust the organization, yet still religiously follow their broadcast identification criteria for visitors. This selective skepticism reveals how discrimination systems exploit desperation. You may recognize FEMA as corrupt and dangerous, but when survival depends on identifying threats, you'll accept their authority on who deserves to be marked as inhuman, becoming complicit in the very system you know is lying to you. Your isolation ends when your neighbor arrives on the first night, warning you to start taking precautions, specifically that you must allow people seeking shelter from the daytime heat to stay in your house, as visitors seem to only attack isolated individuals rather than groups. When you ask why you should let strangers into your house, your neighbor explains the core mechanic. You must always let others know you're not alone, and you'll need to check everyone for signs of being visitors, though doing so will drain your energy. His arrival establishes the game's central tension between self-preservation through isolation and survival through calculated trust. The first night brings a sequence of visitors. Your neighbor stays in the kitchen, followed by the arrival of the tall man and potentially other randomized guests. Since most encounters in the game are randomized, I'll describe them as they appeared in my playthrough, though your experience may differ. The tall man serves as a safe introduction to the game's mechanics, being one of the guaranteed humans you can trust. Yet his abrasive personality and philosophical questioning immediately challenge your assumptions about who belongs and who doesn't. Now you've established the routine that will define your survival. Morning broadcasts, teaching you new ways to identify outsiders, invasive physical examinations of your guests, and nightly decisions about who deserves shelter based on incomplete information and government-sanctioned prejudice. The television broadcast on day 2 reveals your first visitor identification sign, perfect white teeth, justified by the logic that in a post-apocalyptic world without dentistry, nobody should have Hollywood smiles. This first trait establishes the absurdity of the identification system. Perfect dental work becomes grounds for execution, transforming a sign of health and prosperity into a death sentence. When you start to examine teeth on day 2, draining 1 energy bar in the process, you begin the pattern of invasive physical inspection that will define your interactions with every guest. Day 3's television broadcast reveals dirty fingernails as the second visitor sign, with the explanation that visitors supposedly crawl up from underground, leaving dirt and grime caked deep under their fingernails from digging themselves out of the ground. This trait discriminates against manual laborers or even your gardening granny. Anyone whose work involves getting their hands dirty immediately becomes a suspect. The 4Rest delivery service advertises on television, providing a phone number you must use to order supplies. The radio provides additional emergency broadcasts that must be tuned by rotating the knob until the garbled message clears. During daytime, an energy bar tracks how many signs can be inspected each day, with various consumables affecting this resource. Some restore energy for additional checks, while others deplete it to end the day early. After each examination, you're prompted to either kill the guest with a shotgun, or listen to them explain why they show a visitor trait. But these explanations often reveal perfectly reasonable circumstances that the government's broad criteria fail to account for. For one lady with perfect teeth, she states that she just had her teeth fixed, but also suspiciously states that she can't remember much about the procedure, leaving you to wonder if she is a bad liar or just feeling her life in your hands. You may choose to shoot, and if you do, you realize her body doesn't get bagged up, leading one to believe she was in fact a visitor. The game twists the knife further. Examining yourself in the mirror costs the same precious energy as checking guests, so most players go days without self-inspection, judging and executing others while never confirming whether they themselves would pass the very test they're administering. When you finally spend the energy to look, you might discover you've been showing visitor signs all along. Yet here you are deciding who's human enough to live, a hypocrite playing executioner while potentially being exactly what you claim to fear. The intruder arrives on night 3 as the first visitor. He wears nothing but low, dark pants with pale skin, broad shoulders, freakishly long, skinny arms, and an eerie grin showing perfectly white teeth, with the protagonist noting strange folds in his skin and that his skin appears too big for him. According to a story from the Bearded Guy, the intruder was once a regular human who frantically knocked on his door begging to be let inside, described as looking pale as if he had seen death itself. After being refused and threatened with a rifle when he tried to break in, he returned the next day transformed, taller, half naked with sagged skin, easily snapping the rifle in half with his bare hands. This origin story suggests that visitors might be created through trauma and rejection, that the very act of excluding someone from safety can transform them into the monster you feared they were, a self-fulfilling prophecy where discrimination creates its own justification. He asks a critical question. Are you alone? If you answer, yes, I'm alone, or if you actually are alone in the house, he kills you instantly, resulting in the yes, I'm alone ending.
So, that'll do it for us. For Greg Olsen and our terrific...
Even days later, the house remains empty. Everyone avoids it like a dark omen. More rumors swirl than the number of those who ever called it home. The house, just like the final traces of its owner, has been lost to time. No relatives ever come to collect what was left behind. The homeowner simply vanished as if they had never existed at all. Everything that belonged to them is lost, worn away, or forgotten. Why do people disappear so completely? Once death finds you, the proof you ever existed begins to fade almost immediately. Belongings, creations, thoughts, memories, emotions, all dissolve into the void. There is no more you, only nothingness. As if you were never a part of this world to begin with.
Your crypto can be earning you up.
If you have people residing in your home and tell him so, he stops smiling and ominously says, "You're lucky tonight," noting that he can hear people whispering in the house before leaving with the warning, "Who knows what will happen tomorrow?" This encounter establishes the game's core punishment mechanism. Extreme isolation and paranoia become death sentences, forcing you to take calculated risks by sheltering potential visitors to avoid certain death from the intruder. Day 4's visitor identification trait, Bloodshot Eyes, lands on what the game deliberately marks as Conjunctivitis Awareness Day, a brilliant piece of dark irony that exposes the identification system's fatal flaw. Here's a common medical condition that millions of humans suffer from, especially during times of stress and poor hygiene, yet the government broadcasts it as definitive proof of inhuman infiltration. The game forces you to potentially execute someone for having pink eye, a minor infection that would normally warrant eye drops, not death, perfectly demonstrating how discrimination weaponizes ordinary human vulnerabilities into evidence of otherness. You now get the first appearance of the FEMA agent, who arrives wearing a yellow, open-face hazmat suit with a PMK2 gas mask, announcing he's been sent to collect test subjects for government research on visitors. You have no choice in the matter. The agent will forcibly take one of your guests regardless of whether they're human or visitor, and the game's cruelty becomes apparent when you realize the consequence of your earlier violence. If you've already executed a suspected visitor, the agent ignores the corpse and instead drags away someone very much alive, someone you might have spent days protecting, rather than taking the obvious choice of an already dead body you've confirmed as inhuman. They insist on a living person, suggesting the government's evacuation might be something far worse than the execution you've already committed. This forced extraction introduces the concept of sacrificial selection, though you won't receive FEMA notice slips until later encounters. Hope briefly appears on the fourth night as you witness FEMA talking with your neighbor, emergency workers removing bodies, and armed soldiers providing security in the streets, suggesting that order might be restored through institutional authority. The television reveals that FEMA has become the interim government, confirming the complete militarization of society under the guise of emergency management. Later on, night 4, everything that seems stable collapses. The entire contingent of soldiers lies dead outside your window, and your neighbor's house is on fire, with the intruder visible holding a decapitated head. This massacre occurs the same day FEMA shows force, proving that institutional authority cannot protect against whatever the intruder represents. Then the neighbor's daughter arrives at your door. Her father has been killed by visitors and she's scared, seeking shelter as a newly orphaned child. The rapid transition from seeing your neighbor alive to his daughter arriving as an orphan demonstrates how quickly the situation deteriorates. She's confirmed to always be human and safe to let in. Day 5's television broadcast reveals hairless armpits as the fourth visitor identification sign, with the explanation that visitors lacked body hair. The escalation of identification criteria becomes increasingly invasive, moving from external features like teeth and nails to requiring guests to expose intimate parts of their bodies for inspection. Undetected visitors kill your guests while you sleep. You wake to find corpses of people you promised shelter, people who trusted you for protection, now dead because you guessed wrong. The FEMA agent returns on the 5th night, still maintaining professionalism but gaining an attitude toward you during the encounter, taking another person before leaving. You receive your first FEMA notice during this second encounter with the officer, which is a document that allows you to select who gets sent to quarantine. On day 6, there aren't any new arrivals, which is concerning because FEMA keeps taking people from your house. Instead, you look out the peephole and just see the city burning down. The Mushroom Man only appears after completing the game at least once, first showing up on night 6 of subsequent playthroughs offering a Book of Smiles page. He's a mystical figure who speaks of mushroom festivals and mycelium networks, offering an escape route that diverges from the identification system's logic. His path requires you to find and consume a mushroom from your basement on day 7, then eat an apple from the hall shelf on day 8, following instructions that feel more like a cult ritual than survival strategy. Day 7 brings more checks, judgments, and people looking for a place to stay. The burnt firefighter arrives, providing another FEMA notice if you let him in. The FEMA notices force calculated decisions about who's expendable, as you might mark someone you're uncertain about just to prevent FEMA from randomly taking someone you know is human or consider valuable. This mechanic transforms you from executioner into administrator of disappearance, making the violence feel more bureaucratic and humane while ultimately serving the same discriminatory purpose. You're still choosing who vanishes based on suspicion and superficial traits, just with paperwork instead of a shotgun. Day 8's television broadcast announces bugs in ears as a possible visitor sign. On the 8th night, the FEMA agent returns acting less professional with a discourteous mood when talking to you, showing tones of desperation as he talks about needing more people. And unlike previous encounters, he now takes 2 occupants from the house. The agent's desperation suggests whatever happens in quarantine zones requires a constant supply of bodies, whether for experimentation, execution, or something worse. The cult leader shows up and he pushes 3 of his cultists into your home and asks that you take care of them. He threatens to burn your house down if you refuse, though this proves to be an empty threat if the cultists die. The cultists are creepy but confirmed to never be visitors, making them paradoxically safer than many seemingly normal guests. The cultists worship death itself, viewing the apocalypse as a divine cleansing rather than a catastrophe. Their presence introduces an ideological challenge to survival itself, questioning whether preserving life in this collapsed world is even worthwhile. During your conversations, you discover the cultists believe death is underneath everything. The vigilante arrives and tells us he is on the hunt for visitors. He wears necklaces made of human fingers, ears, and teeth, trophies from those he's executed, making him into exactly the kind of monster the system was supposedly designed to protect against. He will not be a guest in your house since he is on a mission. Day 9's television broadcast reveals bleeding gums as a visitor identification sign. The intruder comes back, but this time to play games. He tells you that you will gamble whether he comes in or not. If you have 2 or more visitors in your house, the humans will rebel against you, kick you out, and then you will be alone and the intruder will kill you. One of the rarest events involves a mysterious woman called the Seductive Woman, who may be the visitor version of the protagonist's deceased wife. She can spawn as early as day 4 and as late as day 9, and she stays in your bedroom, appears pregnant only at night, and following specific interaction patterns with curtains, ceiling fans, and windows after she gives birth and passes away, triggers a unique ending called the Child of Doom. The potential return of your dead wife as a pregnant visitor who gives birth and dies suggests that grief and trauma can manifest as the very threats we fear, making us unable to distinguish between love returning and danger arriving.
A choking fog smothers the world, swallowing every. Its silence envelops the world like cotton. It sounds like people are whispering. You call out, but the air falls still. Is meeting them a good omen? Or are they harbingers of disaster? The child stirs in their arms. It can no longer bring light into this world. At least, you don't think it can. Is it our salvation or damnation? Panic grips you. The 3 of them yank the child in opposite directions. You raise your gun and fire blindly, somewhere, anywhere. Day 10's television broadcast reveals skin irritation as a visitor identification sign. On night 10, if you've successfully completed the Mushroom Man's requirements, he returns saying the mycelium has gone cuckoo and that the only solution is to journey to Mushroom Land. When he asks if you're ready to accompany him there, accepting triggers an ending where a gigantic mushroom grows in the center of town, inviting residents to a new kind of cosmic horror. The Mushroom Man represents an alternative to both government authority and violent individualism. The only escape from discriminatory reality might be mass delusion, choosing collective madness over the individual madness of trying to determine who's human. The bigger the mushrooms, the more clumps of malice gather in the mycelium. Why, the cap could cover the whole earth. Until there's nothing left. And now, dear boy, the mycelium must find a way to unleash all that rage. Fiddlesticks. Our ritual was supposed to calm it down.
The apple seeds were meant to remind it of the bond between humans and mushrooms. But it seems the mycelium's gone cuckoo now, blinded by the fury trapped within its threads. Mushroom land is out there somewhere. Quickly, my dear boy. We have to stop the mycelium before the mushroom grows too large. Follow me. Lickety-split. Underground we go. Fiddlesticks. Looks like we're too late, my dear boy. Well, alrighty then. Say, you still got some of that kombucha.
The FEMA agent appears for the final time on night 10, completely shedding any sense of professionalism and getting straight to the point about taking people. He will extract 2 more occupants before departing. The complete breakdown of protocol, with different agents each time who have no memory of previous visits, reveals an organization in terminal collapse, mindlessly following procedures even as their purpose has been forgotten or abandoned. If you've protected all 3 cultists, the cult leader returns on night 10 to check on them. If they're all alive, he'll come back the next day to offer you salvation. This all-or-nothing requirement forces you to choose whom to sacrifice to FEMA to protect death worshippers, inverting normal moral calculations about whose life has value. The vigilante comes back demanding to inspect you for visitor signs. If you show him your armpits or hands, as long as you clean them, he'll back up. But if you fail to wash up, then he'll shoot you dead immediately. If you get shot by him, then ironically you become him, roaming the night killing armed people, demonstrating how violence against violent systems often just reproduces the same violence with different targets.
You hear his shallow wheezing. Bastard, he got me. And how many more has he slaughtered? How many has he burned? Thought he'd drag it out since I didn't go down easy. But what about the others? He's gone quiet. You should probably check he's actually. Because of scum like you, so many are dead. People like you killed my friend. And people like you will never let anybody live in peace. What, you think no one will fight back? I'll crush you. I've already lost everything. But you still have something left to lose. Mine, damned by insanity.
What were you doing when you got...
I'll drive you deep into the ground. I'll drown everything in your blood. Every bastard with a weapon in their hands dies today. Every last one.
To survive this encounter, don't show your teeth unless you have discolored them with cigarettes from the ad, or don't show your eyes if you've been drinking energy drinks or coffee. Definitely don't show him your ears, as he doesn't accept this as a true sign. Day 11's television broadcast reveals fungal growth in the armpit area as a visitor sign. If you've successfully protected all 3 cultists from FEMA and other threats, the cult leader returns on night 11 to offer you salvation in death. He performs a final check on his followers, and if they're all alive, he congratulates you before extending his invitation to join them.
Fear and corruption of her word kept us from her embrace. Not to pass into nothingness, but to return into death. We surrender our bodies unto death's embrace, to find peace in what lies beyond. Long ago, this knowledge dwelled upon the earth, but the great extinction claimed more than lives alone. But now we walk the path and the ways of old. She shall cradle us all. None shall be forsaken. Even death herself shall ascend. Do you feel it? She is here. A voice echoes in the air, its owner unclear. You appeared from nowhere, drawing eyes upon yourself. We must act now. Some doors are best left closed. Come, I will hide you. I shall return you to where you were always meant to be. I will grant you peace. Just as humanity has always longed for. You were never meant to survive the madness of the cosmos. I will preserve your memory. Day 12 announces rapid pupil movement as the final regular visitor sign, a trait so subtle and subjective that it becomes nearly impossible to verify. The progression from external traits like teeth and nails to internal signs like pupil movement represents the identification system's final collapse into pure paranoia, where any micro-expression becomes potential evidence. The vigilante makes his final appearance on night 12, acting more aggressive and hostile than before, demanding another sign to prove you're not a visitor. He reveals that your neighbor was his brother, whom he believes didn't man up enough to protect his family. The television on day 12 reveals that FEMA has enacted a coup d'etat and taken control of everything, while the radio reports that some sort of subject has escaped from their grasp. The military coup represents the final transformation of emergency management into totalitarian control, with FEMA no longer pretending to serve civilian government but openly ruling through force. The escaped subject could be a visitor, a human test subject, or perhaps the distinction no longer matters in a world where everyone is both prisoner and potential threat. During night 12, after the Vigilantes test, various randomized guests arrive for the last time before the final day. These final visitors represent the last remnants of outside society seeking shelter before the complete collapse, each one a potential threat or potential victim, their fate determined by your increasingly arbitrary decisions based on signs that have lost all meaning. On day 13, you perform your final checks, deciding whether to execute remaining guests based on whatever signs you still believe matter. There's no new broadcast, no new identification criteria, just you and your accumulated paranoia making final judgments. Day 14 arrives as a scripted sequence. All you can do is approach the windows in the main corridor and board them up one by one. Each window you seal represents another connection to the outside world severed, another acknowledgement that whatever exists beyond your walls has become permanently uninhabitable. The game performs its final check on day 14, evaluating who remains in your house at the exact moment before boarding up. This determines which ending you receive. If only humans remain, you achieve the end ? Boarding up windows with genuine human companions, you and your fellow survivors move to the basement, descending underground to the very place from which visitors supposedly emerged, completing an ironic circle where those fleeing the monsters must inhabit the monster's domain to survive. The protagonist realizes they must continue living with uncertainty about when death will actually come. The question mark in the title suggests that survival itself is uncertain. You've created a sealed environment with people you believe are human, but the identification system's unreliability means you can never truly know.
At L'Oreal Group, we've reached night.
Some hope the sun will finally burn the ground to ash or fade into darkness. Others seek the end on their own terms. Dragging out the inevitable is more painful than a swift end. No one envies the living. One day, you catch an announcement on the radio. Solar activity is fading. Scientists predict that in a couple of days we'll be safe to go outside during daylight hours in a few days' time. You feel? disappointment? You realize you'll live through this year after all. But then what? Will next summer be the last? The thought of waiting for the end is a suffocating burden. But at least one of the others seems happy. Who knows? Maybe there's still a decade left ahead of you.
If at least one visitor remains among your survivors, you receive the "No, I'm not alone" ending. Paranoia spreads as the group counts days on brick walls, and you're eventually taken in the night by visitors.
It wasn't just humans you let into your home. They tear you apart. Darkness floods your vision. Pain sears through your body. A small, lonely house takes shape in your mind. You hope it will be over soon. It's hard to hold on to. The pain fades as you slip further away. Welcome me.
If you're completely alone, having killed or expelled everyone, the outcome remains the same as having only humans, suggesting that total isolation and successful discrimination lead to identical ends. If paranoia completely consumes you and you kill too many people, especially innocents, you trigger the "yes, I'm a murderer" ending. Either the prophet arrives to judge your descent into madness, or remaining guests force you from the house fearing you'll turn the shotgun on them next, resulting in your death under the scorching sun.
I'm truly sorry. They threw you out into the streets. Unarmed, bloodied. You have no strength left to crawl away from the sunlight. No way to end your suffering on your own terms. You'll burn slowly. And there's no one left to blame.
The various faction endings bypass this sequence entirely, joining the cult, following the Mushroom Man, being recruited by FEMA, or digging through the basement to meet death itself, all represent escapes from the choice between contaminated and pure survival. These alternative endings suggest that the only way to avoid the identification system's false choice between complicity and death is to reject its framework entirely, choosing madness, transcendence, or collaboration with the very forces you were meant to resist. The title, "No, I'm Not Human," ultimately refers not to the visitors but to what systematic discrimination does to everyone involved. The discriminators lose their humanity through the violence they commit. The discriminated lose theirs through being reduced to a collection of physical traits to be examined and judged. The system transforms everyone into something less than human, either monsters or potential monsters, executioners or victims, with no space for genuine human connection. The game's masterstroke lies in making you the active agent of discrimination. You're not watching a character make these choices. You're the one examining armpits, checking teeth for imperfections, deciding who deserves death based on arbitrary physical characteristics. The energy system becomes a metaphor for how discrimination operates in reality. We never have complete information, yet we make irreversible judgments anyway. In our world, we may not check for perfect teeth or hairless armpits, but we have our own arbitrary markers of otherness. We have our own FEMAs extracting people for testing, our own vigilantes dispensing violent justice, our own broadcasts teaching us to identify threats based on superficial characteristics. The game asks us to recognize these systems for what they are, mechanisms that create the very monsters they claim to fight.
that transform ordinary people into willing participants in atrocity through the simple promise of safety. The horror of, no, I'm not human, isn't the visitors. It's the recognition of ourselves in the protagonists, boarding up windows after 2 weeks of examinations and executions, descending into a basement to hide from a world we helped destroy, never knowing if we saved humanity or simply became the newest monsters in an endless cycle of fear and violence. The game leaves us with a question that haunts long after the credits roll. In a world that demands you discriminate to survive, is survival worth the cost of becoming a discriminator?
BetMGM Casino. Jackpots, so many.
BetMGM Casino.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the 21st episode of Analyzing Evil, featuring the oft-requested Dr. Hannibal Lecter. In this video, I'll be covering Hannibal as he appears in the novels by Thomas Harris, as well as the films featuring Anthony Hopkins, with Gaspar Ulliel and Aaron Thomas playing the young Hannibal in Hannibal Rising. We get a line from Dr. Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs, where he states that nothing happened to make him the way he is, but that notion, fortunately or unfortunately, is not the case for the character. I know that some of you watching this video may loathe parts of the backstory Harris created for his character, but I cannot ignore the canonical and intended narrative of a character as laid out by his creator, and this video will go into every aspect of Hannibal that was given to us by Thomas Harris. I also understand that the only reason Thomas Harris wrote Hannibal Rising in the first place is because the producer of the latter three films, Dino De Laurentiis, told Harris he would collaborate with another writer to write a backstory for Lecter if he didn't. Nonetheless, the story is from Harris, and is thus canon, to simplify things, and to give us a solid structure to transition to.
I don't want to watch this video.
And they were able to pull away for the victory. And Brand, I think they're the type of team that just looked in the mirror and said, hey, ton of pressure.
Gus Fring.
We're the type of team that can flat out handle it. They stood up with confidence.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the 94th episode of Analyzing Evil, featuring Gus Fring from Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. One of the classiest and most ruthless villains in television history, Gus Fring is the man we all hate to love, a suave and sophisticated gentleman wielding enormous power who will stop at nothing to achieve his dark aims. And in this video, we're going to cover everything from his origins to the extensive amount of crimes committed by this meticulous monster, so we might discover just how deep the evil of Gustavo Fring runs. Now, there are plenty of great characters to cover in the Breaking Bad universe, but there are three that I haven't gotten to yet that really stand out above the rest as far as deserving an analysis goes. Those being, of course, Gus, but also Saul Goodman and Lalo Salamanca. So with that in mind, the next two videos following this one are going to be about Saul and Lalo respectively, and at least for the foreseeable future, I won't be covering any more characters from either one of these series. So, I hope that these next three videos give you all the Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul fix you've been craving since the video on Walter was released over a year ago. But before we begin, it's finally time for us to talk about the sponsoriest sponsor to ever sponsorize the sponsored, Raid Shadow Legends. With hundreds of artifacts to equip, and over 6 books of all the way to your historical things I'd like to address before we continue with this video. The first of those things being drugs. I'm not here to comment on the morality of using drugs, or whether or not they should be illegal. I'm aware that plenty legitimate businesses do terrible things in this world, and opinions on this subject are varied, but I think we can all agree that meth isn't exactly the greatest thing in the world, and whether legitimate or not, the world would probably be a much better place without it. In this video, we're examining Gus, and although meth and other drugs are a large component of his business, it's only a vehicle Gus uses to accomplish his other nefarious goals. The second thing I'd like to touch on is crime, which can be a nuanced subject depending on the circumstances. For example, robbing a bank may not seem like it's too terrible a crime to commit. After all, as Spooge attempts to argue in Breaking Bad, it's a victimless crime if nobody's hurt, as the banks are insured, so what's the harm? But there are so many other factors that you need to consider in such a scenario. When you rob a bank, you're not just taking the money, but you're also putting the lives of civilians and officers of the law at risk. And that includes the tellers, bankers, customers, and pedestrians if there's a chase following the robbery, and so on and so forth. The same could be said for murder that's committed as the result of, or in service to, criminal enterprises. Nobody joins the mafia and assumes that it's going to be all daisies and roses. Everyone participating in these activities knows the rules of the game, so to speak, and in that way, some of the murders a person may commit while partaking in criminal activity may be more forgivable in a sense, as the only people you may be hurting are other criminals. However, as with robbing a bank, there are many facets to crime that cause horrible repercussions for people who aren't involved in these endeavors, and the act of upholding a culture and business that deals in the harm or endangerment of individuals, whether they be willful participants or not, is something that shouldn't be taken lightly or encouraged. I will be pointing out the crimes he commits in this series that are understandable and perhaps forgivable in a sense, but I wanted to make these two notions clear before proceeding with this video. Now without further ado, let's begin. Gustavo Fring's past is largely a mystery. Born April 26, 1958 in Chile, Gustavo grew up incredibly poor, stating to Hector at his sickbed that his family barely had anything to eat on a daily basis, and that they were always hungry. Here, Gus explains that in his desire to lift his family out of poverty, he tended to a wasting lupuma tree that his family considered a lost cause, eventually reinvigorating it and using its fruit to both keep his family fed in the short term and to make a living selling the fruit to keep his family out of poverty. Now, aside from this story, and another part of it that we'll be talking about a bit later on, we know precious little about Gus's life from the time he was a child until his escape from Chile in 1986. But there are a few inferences we can make about his background that might shed some light on how he became who he is and why he had to flee, and it all starts with his German influences. During his tenure as the Chicken Man, Gus's chain of restaurants were not solely owned by him. They were a subsidiary of the Madrigal Electromotive Corporation, a German conglomerate that oversaw numerous business endeavors. Initially, it seems quite strange that a fast food chain based in New Mexico and operated by a Chilean would be owned by a German company. But in episode 7 of season 5, we learn that the head of Madrigal's restaurant division, Peter Schuler, was a longtime associate of Gus's, stretching all the way back to his time in Chile, and he seems to have been a close one at that, considering Gus consoles a distraught Peter during the initial trouble with Lalo by reassuring him that the strength he once held when they had their backs to the wall in Chile is still alive and well within him. Now initially, you might think that Gus and Peter became associates later in life, when they were both involved in whatever their professions were at the time, but there are a lot of possibilities to be found in this scenario. For example, Germany and Chile have had a long history of relations stretching back almost 2 centuries, and there are many ways in which Gus could have come in contact with the German diaspora in Chile. The area he lived in could have had a sizable German population. He could have had business dealings with them selling his lupuma fruits, or perhaps he might have mingled with German students at the university he likely attended. Regardless of how he came into contact with his German friends, what matters most here is what happened in Chile in 1973, the coup d'etat against President Salvador Allende that was orchestrated by Augusto Pinochet and his military junta. During this time, many Chileans chose to flee from Chile, and 7,000 of those refugees chose to find asylum in Germany, and many of them formed solidarity groups that would endeavor to bring down the Pinochet regime from afar. Now with this information comes a few more possibilities, and we need to keep in mind that at the time of Pinochet's ascent to power, Gus was only 15 years old, which limits these possibilities to a certain degree. So, it could be that Gus and his family were amongst the 7,000 who fled to Germany because of their already established German contacts, and from there, he joined one of these resistance groups and climbed quite high in the ranks, eventually reaching a point where he was able to return to Chile as a saboteur in the Chilean government, working with his friend Peter Schuler to do what they could to topple Pinochet from the inside. Or perhaps Gus, after becoming a successful lupuma salesman, remained in Chile and eventually managed to put himself through school where he met Peter Schuler, after which, with assistance from his German contacts, he joined the Pinochet government in order to again bring it down from the inside. However, what we're missing here is motivation. Perhaps fighting for freedom against an oppressive regime was enough motivation for Gus to take action against Pinochet, but that seems unlikely, as Gus doesn't exactly seem like the freedom fighter type. Therefore, I think we can find all the motivation Gus needed for going against Pinochet by examining the piece of the story he told to Hector of his childhood that I haven't mentioned yet, which is the greatest insight we've ever been given into what kind of man Gustavo Fring is. During this tale, Gus informs Hector that not long after he had begun to cultivate his akuma tree, a coati, which is a small animal in the raccoon family, native to South and Central America, ate much of the fruit off of his tree, so Gus built a snare to capture the coati to rid his family's livelihood of this interloper. That it broke free from its snare and hid beneath Gus's house. So Gus waited for it into the night, not making so much as a sound, as he concentrated all of his energy on capturing this creature, which he eventually did, afterwards keeping it as a pet, remarking that the merciful thing would have been to kill it. Now this story tells us two very important things about what kind of man Gus is. First is that Gus is the kind of man who will never suffer any slights against his person. In this situation, it's telling that Gus, rather than taking preventative measures to protect his tree, in the long run, he instead chose to set a trap for the specific coati and teach it a lesson by keeping it as a pet and lording over it as its triumphant master. Taking measures to eliminate this specific pest in this instance, by trapping it, isn't exactly an unheard of thing, but within Gus, it adds that extra bit of personal touch that we come to expect from him over the course of this series. The second thing to note here is Gus's tenacity and will to see any vision he might have through to completion, no matter the odds stacked against him. Specifically, his unwavering dedication to exacting his revenge upon those who have wronged him. Rather than simply setting another trap for the coati, Gus watched for this creature like a hawk all through the night in order to ensure that he could deal with it in the most sadistically satisfying way possible. These two aspects of Gus drive his entire character, and they serve as fuel for the one thing that is Gus's motivation for everything he does: revenge, the most crucial aspect of his character that I'll be referring back to often as we progress through this video. With that in mind, it would make sense then that Gus decided to become a part of the Chilean resistance out of a desire to exact revenge against the Pinochet regime, as again, I don't think a man like Gus would be too interested in fighting for freedom's sake. So then, in this instance, who was he trying to avenge? I believe the answer to that is his family. Aside from this conversation with Hector, we never hear a word about Gus's family throughout this series. And though that could be because they disowned him because of his sexual orientation, which we'll touch on a bit later, I think it's possible that Gus's family might have perished in one way or another at the hands of the Pinochet regime. Perhaps his brothers fought in the army and met their end there, or maybe his family was involved in a resistance effort and they were rounded up and executed by Pinochet's secret police, the DINA, the Dirección de Inteligencia Nacional, or as it was known after 1977, the CNI, or Centro Nacional de Informaciones. So considering that Gus was only 15 years old at the time of Pinochet's ascent to power, I think it's possible that Gus's family suffered injustice at the hands of the regime over the course of many years. Perhaps Gus attended college in Chile, Germany, or both, and over the years, the members of his family were gradually murdered by the regime, or died fighting for it in unjust wars and conflicts. And while all of us would be justified in our anger at a despotic regime's destruction of the lives of our families, Gus, being Gus, took it to the next level and decided to concentrate his efforts on exacting ultimate revenge against the Pinochet regime. Peter Schuler might have been in the same boat as Gus, as again, Chilean-German relations go back a long way, and though it's still possible that Gus might have met Peter in Germany, it's far more likely that Gus met Peter in Chile during his childhood or when he attended university, and upon meeting Peter, he found in him a kindred spirit who had also suffered injustices at the hands of the Pinochet regime. During this time period, there was a notorious cult active in Chile that was comprised of German immigrants, known as the Colonia Dignidad, or Dignity Colony, a hyper-religious group led by a man named Paul Schaefer, a former Nazi and child abuser. This cult was responsible for numerous horrendous crimes during this time, including the aforementioned child abuse, but they were also a glorified wing of the DINA, as several political prisoners were imprisoned and tortured at the Colonia Dignidad. Perhaps Peter's family were members of the colony, and he bore witness to the atrocities they committed, and with the help of Gus, Chilean resistance efforts, and perhaps even the West or East German governments, Peter likely followed a similar path that Gus did. Maybe his own family met their end at the hands of the DINA and the Colonia Dignidad in a similar fashion to Gus's family, and supporting this idea might be the fact that Peter Schuler and Paul Schaefer share similar names, which could be a nod to Peter being involved in Colonia Dignidad, though admittedly, this might be a bit of a stretch. Whatever the case may be, I believe the most likely scenario that brought Gus and Peter together were shared traumatic experiences and a desire to exact revenge on the Pinochet government for their crimes against them personally. So, in what way were Peter and Gus involved with or in the Pinochet government that afforded them the ability to operate as saboteurs? Well, for Gus, we have the comment made by Hector in a flashback where he refers to Gus as the Gran Generalissimo, which could indicate that Gus was a high-ranking member of the Chilean army before he was forced to flee the country. Now, this might be the case, but I think this was more of a jab at Gus than anything. And knowing Gus, I think it's far more likely that he would have chosen to enter the aforementioned secret police, the DINA, so he might be able to personally deal with the men who wronged his family. As what better way is there to kill and perhaps torture your enemies than to break them apart from within? I imagine that Gus may have worked his way through the ranks of the DINA and was given the opportunity to explore the more brutal side of his person by of course performing his duties as a DINA officer, but also by setting up his compatriots to be dealt with by his own hand. Perhaps making sure that these agents would be found out as traitors, so he could quote-unquote interrogate them, or maybe some of them met their untimely end while out working a case with Gus, unfortunately perishing at the hands of whoever their targets were, deaths that of course couldn't be traced back to Gus. As for Peter Schuler, he could have also been a member of the DINA who had his hand in the nefarious dealings at Colonia Dignidad, his own front used to take revenge against the cult supported by the Chilean government that had wronged him and his family. If this is true, I believe this leads us to a better understanding of how a very important event in Gus's life came to occur, that being his flight from Chile. If we can pin Gus's service in the DINA as the method he would use to exact his revenge against the Pinochet government, it would make sense then that his efforts would culminate in his involvement in the assassination attempt made on Pinochet's life on September 7, 1986. This assassination attempt was made by the urban guerrilla group called the Manuel Rodriguez Patriotic Front, who were actively engaged in an insurgency against the Pinochet government. On the appointed day, members of the MRPF ambushed Pinochet's motorcade in Cuesta de las Achupayas, a bottleneck road along mountainous terrain between Santiago and Cajon del Maipo. Now, it wouldn't make sense to claim that Gus was directly involved in the attack, as a member of the DINA surely wouldn't be able to place himself in the middle of the action here. But it would make sense that Gus, with the help of his friend Peter Schuler, gave the information concerning the whereabouts of Pinochet's motorcade on that day to the MRPF, and perhaps they were involved in providing the MRPF with some of the arms they would need for the attack, and they might have even helped them plan the whole thing as well. But unfortunately, this attack was unsuccessful, and with that in mind, I think we have an idea of how Gus and Peter found their backs against the wall in Santiago. Now, a meticulous and pragmatic man like Gus would have been well prepared for this eventuality, and I imagine in the ensuing chaos following the assassination attempt, Gus scrambled to destroy any and all records pertaining to his and Peter's existence in order to save himself from being fingered in this plot by any of the MRPF members involved. That were likely tortured for information after this event. That likely failed to some degree, considering that he had to leave the country following this event. From this unfortunate position, he fled to Mexico with his close friend and lover, Max Arciniega, a place where they had already opened a chain of Los Pollos Hermanos restaurants, and Peter likely made his way to Germany with the help of the German government, where he would become an employee of Madrigal. This was obviously a turning point in Gus's life, but now we need to discuss the event that completely eliminated whatever path he might have been on following his escape from Chile, one that turned his life irrevocably towards the concept that he had so far dedicated most of his life to, revenge. That event being the death of Max Arciniega. But before we go over that horrific occurrence in Gus's life, we first need to talk about who Max is and what his relationship to Gus is. Max was said to have grown up in the slums of Santiago, and though we don't know how Max and Gus met, we do know that Gus funded Max's education at the Universidad de Santiago de Chile, where he majored in chemistry. So it's likely that just like Peter Schuler, Gus met Max while he was a student at the university, perhaps an elder student serving as a mentor, who developed a close bond with him, or he might have known him since his youth, or bonded with the young Max after meeting him whilst he was a denizen of the streets. But regardless of how they met, the two would eventually fall in love as they developed their friendship and their business. That business being selling a strain of meth that Max had developed that would allow them to open up their signature Los Pollos Hermanos restaurants to use as a front, and I imagine with Gus's contacts at the DINA, this endeavor was all the more easy to accomplish. Following the assassination attempt, Max escaped to Mexico with Gus, where they would continue their operation through the chain they had already established there. Business dealings that eventually achieved the desired result and got them noticed by Don Eladio Puente, the man whose influence they could use to potentially expand their meth business exponentially. However, this blessing proved to be a curse, as Don Eladio was not too pleased that Gus and Max had been dealing drugs in his territory under his nose. And at their first meeting with Don Eladio, and because of Gus's past, rather than punishing Gus with death, on Eladio's orders, Hector Salamanca executed Max in front of Gus, a moment that perhaps more than the destruction of his family broke Gus's heart beyond repair. Now what's interesting about this situation is Eladio's willingness to keep Gus alive because of his past. As if my theory about him being a member of the DINA holds up, it seems odd that a drug lord would be fearful of the consequences of murdering a disgraced former member of another country's secret police. Perhaps the most likely explanation here is that Gus, being the man he is, would have probably put in place a few fail-safes prior to meeting with Eladio to ensure that in the event of his death, it wouldn't be in vain. And Eladio may have feared the retaliation that would follow. Or it could be that Eladio knew how useful Gus would be to his operation when he learned of his talents and connections, and chose to keep him alive for that reason. Whatever the case may be, from this moment on, just like his run-in with the Coati in his youth, and the death of his family at the hands of the DINA, rather than wishing to rid himself of the horrid business that killed the man he loved, Gus chose to ingrain himself in this world in order to one day utterly destroy the lives of the men who wronged him here. And after this occurrence, what is there to say about what kind of man Gustavo Fring is? Starting with his appearance, there isn't much to say here save for the fact that Gus is always dressed in immaculate casual or formal business attire. His hair is always neat and his face clean-shaven. However, his appearance does give us a good starting point for discussing his personality, as there's a condition that Gus suffers from that defines it, along with his actions and mannerisms. Obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD. Now in Breaking Bad, we're given a few glimpses into how orderly and neat Gus is, namely in the infamous scene where he neatly prepares protection for himself before he murders Victor, and cleans himself thoroughly after the murder, and when he makes sure to fold his jacket, remove his glasses, and place a towel down in front of the toilet at Don Eladio's house as he prepares to throw up the poison he just ingested. But in Better Call Saul, we're shown that his meticulous nature isn't just another component of his personality, but a full-on disorder. One that's always present in his neatness, but one that manifests itself more severely when Gus is in distress, and we're given two examples of this behavior. The first is when Lalo and Nacho are attempting to outmaneuver Hank and Steve when Crazy 8 starts informing them about Gus and Lalo's dead drops. Taking Nacho's advice, Gus chooses to allow this sting operation to occur, planning to let the DEA take $700,000 in cash after one of his subordinates gathers the money from the dead drop. And in order to ensure that none of this can be tied back to Gus, he had Victor post up close to the target area, where he would recover the associate after he made his escape from the DEA's pursuit. This operation was successful, but obviously, if the associate hadn't managed to make it to Victor, that would have still put Gus at risk anyway, and to take such a calculated risk brought Gus immense anxiety, to the point where his OCD manifested in his mistreatment of one of his most loyal employees, Lyle. Here we see Gus commenting on the state of an impeccably clean deep fryer, asking Lyle if he believes this is an acceptable level of cleanliness, and though Lyle, like all of us, assumed it was, he got the cue and began needlessly scrubbing the fryer to satisfy his boss. Gus proceeds to force him to repeat this task several times, all because in that moment he was incredibly anxious while he waited to hear what his fate might be, a nervous compulsion that he would have acted out himself had he not had a person handy to order to take this action on his behalf, which ends up being a mixture of his tendency to exert absolute control over a situation, which he did not have here, and his disorder. The other instance where we get to see these symptoms come out is when he's trying to figure out what to do when he's realized that Lalo has survived the hit he put out on him. Gus is perhaps in more danger here than he had been since the death of Max, as even the previous example of his disorder's manifestation pales in comparison to how much peril Gus found himself in here, as not only was he anxiously waiting to see when and where Lalo would emerge, but he also had Nacho to worry about. A man who, if he fell into the hands of the cartel, could implicate Gus in a whole slew of treacherous activities. Losing his composure, Gus knocks over and shatters a water glass, and rather than having one of his associates clean up the mess, he proceeds to pick up as many pieces as he can with his bare hands, a wholly unnecessary action that could have caused him quite a bit of harm. And this action, more than his chastisement of Lyle, shows us just how much of a hold Gus's OCD has over his life, as any person who wasn't suffering from this disorder would have likely moved to pick up a broom, but his compulsion, mixed with his anxiety, quite literally, forced his hand here. But outside of adding an extra layer of distress to any stressful situation Gus finds himself in, his OCD is quite the contributing factor to his success, as in tandem with his pragmatism and patience, the meticulousness this disorder imposes upon him helps Gus become perhaps one of the greatest planners we've ever seen in popular media. The plan to capture the Coati, bringing the Chilean government down via his membership in the DINA, and his decades-long plan to eliminate the entire Salamanca family and the cartel. All of these endeavors are accomplished because Gus is able to maneuver his way around any of his opponents, because he doesn't allow needless emotion to cloud his judgment. Well, most of the time at least, as a burning desire for revenge has essentially ruined his life. But we'll be discussing that further a little later on in this video. In accordance with his farsight regarding his nefarious plans, Gus maintains an immaculate public persona. While in public, Gus is always kind, courteous, and well-mannered, and his mannerisms can be quite warm and inviting. When he's interacting with his employees or other civilians, he's essentially the perfect gentleman, and as a result, in the greater community, he's seen as a veritable icon. He makes sure to show face as a philanthropist, donating to the DEA, Youth Development Inc., and various other charitable causes to ensure that he's seen as a pillar of the community who couldn't possibly do anything wrong. However, that's nothing but a front, and the real Gus Fring is a different person entirely. In private, or when he's interacting with people in the criminal underworld, Gus is an entirely joyless man. He puts on the same persona that he does in public when he's interacting with men like Walter, Eladio, Hector, or Bolsa, but he only does that to keep up the illusion of respect. Outside of these few interactions, Gus nearly always has a dour look on his face, and along with his stiff and precise mannerisms, he projects an aura of seriousness that conveys to us his no-nonsense attitude, one that leaves no room for any sort of levity or mistakes whatsoever. A cold personality crafted by the many that he's suffered over the years. The truth of Gus Fring gives us great insight into his personal relationships, or more appropriately, his lack thereof. Throughout this series, we're shown only one relationship that Gus had that could be considered a close one, the one he had with his lover, Max Arciniega. And even then, we are only given a brief glimpse into their relationship during their meeting with Don Eladio. But what's more important than the particulars of their relationship here is the fact that it ended. As I said earlier, the death of Max utterly destroyed Gus, shattering his heart and taking from him whatever warmth he might have had prior to his death. And because of the overwhelming despair he feels over his lover's death, Gus is now incapable of forming any sort of meaningful relationships with others. In Breaking Bad, we're shown that he may have had a wife at some point, considering it's hinted at that he might have had children, but we're never actually shown any concrete evidence of this notion. And Gus appears to us as a man entirely apart from the rest of the world, only showing any semblance of normal relations with others when he's interacting with the public, using his manufactured Dos Pollos Hermanos business magnate persona, or when he puts on airs, when acting as the amiable and obedient servant of Don Eladio. When we see Gus interact with his subordinates, even the close ones like Mike, Victor, and Tyrus, he speaks with them solely on a professional level, and never gives them any of the superficial charm that he feels the need to give to others. The only time we see the real Gus interacting with one of his business associates on a more personal level is when he first invites Walter to his house for dinner, and then sometime later, when he extends the same invitation to Jesse. During his dinner with Walt, he speaks with him like he's an acquaintance, discussing the traditional Chilean dish he's making for them in a friendly tone, seemingly letting his guard down in the presence of a man who is in some ways a man just like Gus. And though initially it might seem here that Gus is attempting to develop a relationship with a man who might understand him, the truth is, this event is more akin to his placation of the high-ranking members of the cartel than being a genuine attempt at developing a friendship. Gus knowing that Walt is similar to him in many ways, is engaging with him at this level, so he might con him into believing that their future together could be one of close cooperation, outside of a simple employer-employee relationship, an act, which Gus knows, will please Walt's inflated ego, and hopefully convince him to keep working for him. And this is exemplified by Gus's attempt at striking at Walt's macho provider sensibilities, stating to Walt that a man bears his responsibilities because he is a man, and a man will do what he has to do for the sake of his family because he is a man, showing us that Gus never truly cared whether or not Walt felt their relationship was that of friends, but that it was always about baiting him into remaining one of the most valuable components of his operation. The only other time that we see Gus acting this way towards one of his subordinates is with Jesse and Gale. He gives Jesse the same dinner treatment he gave Walt for the same reason. However, Gale is a man who Gus feels the need to placate in a similar way to Walter, albeit in more of the I need to treat this person well because they're a gentle soul way, rather than the this man has a tremendous ego that needs to be satisfied in order for him to operate according to my will. And though he eventually resorts to cowing Walter by instilling fear in him, Gus understands that these half-civilians wouldn't be open to working for him should he treat them the way he's accustomed to treating his other criminal associates. That is, coldly, with a heavy dose of fear instilled within them, so they toe the Gestapo frame line. That isn't to say that Gus doesn't on some level care for his subordinates, as we see when Gus has Mike spirited away to one of his safe havens in Mexico so he might recover from the injuries he suffered after being jumped, as well as his relapsed alcoholism. But even here, this is still likely Gus offering this sort of care to Mike because he knows the value he brings to his organization, rather than ensuring Mike is cared for because he cares for him on a more personal level. And when you consider one of the crimes Gus committed against one of his most loyal and longest-serving subordinates that we'll be covering shortly, it becomes clear that Gus has no more attachment to these men than he does with a stranger. There is one time during this series where Gus does make a half-hearted attempt at connecting with someone on a more personal level, that being when he's having a conversation with David, the sommelier at the wine bar he visits after returning home from a meeting with Don Eladio. Here we see the interest Gus has in this man painted plainly on his face, eyeing him with a romantic lustfulness that shows us that Gus has likely admired this man for quite some time, and it's possible that David might have been a good potential match for Gus here. But Gus's demeanor quickly changes when David excuses himself from the conversation momentarily. The reality of who he is, what he does, and where his heart truly is, ruining any chance Gus might have had here at forming a meaningful relationship with another person. And this, along with the death of Max, shows us that who Gus is not who he wants to be. And when it comes down to it, Gus's traumas, as well as the path he's chosen to walk, have rendered him a deeply unhappy man who would likely trade all the money and power that he's amassed to be free from the horrors of what he's experienced, and the tragedy that is his drive to complete a mission that he feels must be completed, no matter the cost to himself or others. That isn't to say, though, that Gus doesn't enjoy his position as a man wielding incredible criminal power, as it's quite apparent that Gus doesn't just want to eliminate Hector and company and then find a nice quiet place to retire once he's achieved his revenge, as following the death of Don Eladio, it would appear that Gus planned to remain the dominant force in his illicit world, the center of narcotic authority that would operate with a sense of dignity, intelligence, patience, and foresight that would ensure that Gus Fring's power would remain absolute until the end of his days. With that being said, with all that we've discussed about who Gus Fring is, it's now time for us to cover the many crimes of Gus Fring, and we're going to cover them in two different categories: crimes committed against those in the game, and crimes committed against innocents. To simplify things, in these categories, we're going to cover each of his crimes according to their severity, starting with his more forgivable ones, and ending with the most heinous. Now, his crimes committed against people who are in the criminal game are by nature more forgivable than the ones he's committed against innocents. But there are still a fair few crimes in this category that Gus either committed directly or influenced that are pretty terrifying. But as far as the more forgivable ones in this category go, we have, of course, the unknown number of murders ordered by or conducted with Gus's blessing against various criminals and criminal groups in the United States and abroad, like Arturo Colon, Hector Salamanca's man that Gus murdered by suffocating him with a bag so he could better take control of the Salamanca's business interests. The unknown number of Espinosa gang members who were massacred by the cousins so Gus could take over their territory. Miguel and Cecilio, the two guards, who were killed during the attempted hit on Lalo, Lalo Salamanca himself by Gus's own hand, Combo, who was murdered by Tomas on the orders of the drug dealers working for Gus, Marco Salamanca, who was shot and killed by Hank because of Gus's influence, as well as Leonel Salamanca, who was also shot by Hank and later poisoned by Mike while he was recovering in the hospital, Juan Bolsa, and his bodyguards, who were killed because Bolsa was beginning to suspect Gus's involvement in numerous unfortunate occurrences for the cartel. The most recent event at that time being the deaths of Marco and Leonel. Then we have the two drug dealers in his employ that murdered Tomas, who were killed by Walter to protect Jesse, the 6 cartel assassins killed by Mike when protecting Gus's cargo, and finally, Don Eladio and all of his men that perished at his home when Gus gifted him a poisoned bottle of tequila.
Hey, Jackie, it's time to get off the couch and into the game to experience the thrill and excitement of playing Powerball!
Though it should also be mentioned here that Gus choosing to discontinue Hector's treatment following his stroke so he wouldn't be able to walk or regain the ability to speak is barbaric, but it's still committed against Hector Salamanca, who is quite the piece of work. These are all the murders or actions that can more or less be excused as being the consequences of engaging in an illicit business that are forgivable in a sense. But now we need to talk about the crimes that, while still being committed against people playing the criminal game, are a lot less forgivable. And it starts with Victor. This one is going to be brief, as Victor was no slouch when it came to following his boss's brutal orders, and by no means can we claim that he didn't deserve, in some way, to be punished for the many crimes he likely committed over the years, not to mention that he's a gangster who knew what he was getting into. But the way in which Victor was killed was horrendously brutal, and though it's quite enough for us to see Gus executing one of his subordinates with not a shred of emotion on his face, and then literally washing his hands of it like nothing happened, what makes it all the more terrifying is the fact that it was Victor that he killed, one of his longest serving and most loyal associates, for making a single mistake, allowing Walt to use his phone long enough to alert Jesse to his position, and sending him to kill Gale in response, which does admittedly ruin a lot of Gus's plans, but this is one of the best examples we're given of Gus's zero-tolerance policy when it comes to mistakes, showing us that not even years of loyal service can outweigh failure in Gus's mind. A lighter example of this attitude is given to us in Gus's insistence that Werner Ziegler be killed after he attempts to take a vacation with his wife. Werner was not nearly as ingrained in the Gus Fring organization as Victor was, but this is another great example of how Gus will not tolerate even a single deviation from the plans that he's made for a person within the confines of his organization. And though Werner was at least partially aware of the consequences of his actions, his murder is still one committed against a person who was in the game that pulled on our heartstrings. Now next up is another heartbreaking murder, Nacho Varga. However, Nacho is no stranger to committing his own acts of evil, but to his credit, throughout the latter half of Better Call Saul, Nacho is trying his best to get out of the drug business. However, his attempts at doing so are severely hampered by Gus. After Hector suffers his stroke and is put into a coma, Gus essentially claims ownership.
We're not gonna go over the rest of this because it spoils the show. Needless to say, he's really fucking evil. We're gonna actually end it because we're in a new season. We always